Let us pray. Almighty God, we have called us to govern this province. We ask your help to make decisions and laws that will be just and will promote the interests of the people. Almagtige God, ons bid dat u gedurende ons vergaderings ons die nodige wysheid sal gee en ons motiewe suiwer sal hou en dat u ons sal help om ons tekortkominge te oorkom en al ons besluite aan u op te dra. Sikilele ilesbe letu nabantu balo. Umesele ukulungu kwipondu letu. Kosi sikilele I Afrika. Kina abantwana bayo. Kukela inkukeli zayo. Iniki ikolo I Afrika. All this we beg in your holy name. Amen. Please be seated. I want to see the Chief Whip.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. That notwithstanding Rule 198, precedence be given to the subject for discussion.
No objections agreed to that one. We will then proceed with the subject for discussion. In the name of the Honourable Beverly Schaefer, I see the Honourable Schaefer.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, this is a story that began in 2015, an impact on 34 million people back then, and a subsequent million cattle lost. Lowest recorded rainfall between October 2015 and January 2016, with the hottest temperatures recorded in the past 10 years. It's a story with an impact on almost 1,600 settlements in the Western Cape just 12 months ago. And it's a tragic story resulting in the devastation of thousands of hectares of land, ravishing people's homes, and leading to the subsequent loss of 11 lives a few weeks ago. This last 24 months of really dry conditions in the Western Cape and adverse weather patterns we have experienced exasperated the intensity and extent of fires along the Southern Cape. But, Speaker, while there is a definite impact of climate change and a much drier province on the one hand, on the other, there is another side to the story that must be told here. Over the past few weeks, the ANC in the Western Cape has made a cheap attempt at peddling a campaign blaming the DA for the current drought and subsequent disaster status of the province. Articles which seek to besmirch the DA's name and reputation have repeatedly made the headlines, many of which can be found, unsurprisingly, in publications we already know to be pro-ANC. The central narrative in each story is the same. The drought crisis is DA's biggest failure in the Western Cape. And while I find it fascinating is the blatant misunderstanding of provincial mandate when it comes to water provision and scarcity.
Member, just 1 second. Honourable Olivier, you're interfering with the member speaking.
Contrary to what the ANC might believe or know to be true, is that the Western Cape has tirelessly lobbied for the need for greater water provision infrastructure prior to 2009. Indeed, we have long been aware of the projected population growth in this province and the subsequent need for natural resources to sustain it. One only needs to track the performance record of the Department of Water and Sanitation over the past 2 decades to understand why we currently find ourselves in a crisis. An article by journalist Willem Steenkamp published in January 2005 details a 10-year delay in water infrastructure projects which were supposed to be implemented between 1995 and 96. The then Waters Affairs Minister, under the pressure of a lobby organization called the Anti-Dam Lobby, deliberately pulled on hold the much-needed construction of the Skyfram and Berg River dams in the Western Cape. The Berg River Dam was subsequently only completed and opened in 2009, more than 10 years after the project was proposed. But national incompetence when it comes to water affairs is by no means a new anomaly. After months of pleas from the City of Cape Town, the regional head of water and sanitation in the province, Mr. Rashid Khan, stated in February this year that it was still too early to declare Cape Town an emergency disaster area. This has been his response in the face of a drastic shortage of water and subsequent calls for intervention since 2015. It was in this House a year ago when we criticised the dismal response of the ANC MPs and national government in dealing with the agricultural drought and the plea to declare 3 drought disaster areas in the Western Cape. What's changed? It seems that the Department of Water and Sanitation is seemingly setting the province up for failure through the pitiful provincial budget the Western Cape receives from this department. The latest national budget for the Department of Water and Sanitation is some 16 billion, of which the Western Cape, the country's fourth most populated province and home to its second largest city, receives a measly 400 million. That means that the Western Cape receives a dismal 2.5% of the National Department's annual budget, a slap in the face to the more than 6 million South Africans who call the Western Cape their home. This is a department that paid a close friend of President Jacob Zuma, Philani Mavundla, an 81 million advance on a 1 billion tender by an entity of the department. This is a department that overspent by 110 million in accumulated bills totaling 1.5 billion. This is a department that is now bankrupt and spends almost 44% of its budget servicing the debt of its various unfinished water projects in South Africa. It comes as no surprise that this severely mismanaged department has failed the Western Cape and our water needs. Just yesterday, Water and Sanitation Minister Mokunyane has dissolved the Overberg's Water Board's leadership following a forensic investigation to investigate allegations of possible financial irregularities by its board members. Dam capacity and aging infrastructure has not been adequately addressed since '94 and is taking on a toll on the future and economic growth of this province, but of South Africa at large. Water security must remain front and center for all of government. But the story continues elsewhere between the National Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries and the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform. Preliminary findings by Agri-SA reveal that DAF has allocated 212 million for drought relief measures, but only spent 146 million. As stated in the President's SONA, commercial farmers have said that of the 2.5 billion allocated to drought relief, no one had seen any of it. Where is the money, we ask? Farmers around the country have stated that much more money was allocated to inexperienced distribution companies, overpriced feed and boreholes. Speaker, this stinks of tender corruption and fraud. The tragedy of drought was a slaughtering of breeding cattle that took decades to build up, farmers going bankrupt and agri-workers being without work. Honourable Speaker, as the DA, we understand with the advent of global warming and the subsequent shift in our climatic patterns, drought is inevitable. Rainfall across the country has changed and traditional predictions have not been as reliable as usual. We could not adequately predict the drought in the Western Cape, but every effort that the Western Cape has made to combat it at its earliest convenience has been thwarted by the national government. We could have begun effective drought relief almost a year ago had national government heeded our calls and delivered on their mandate when they governed in this province. I thank you.
Honourable Diana.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. One would have hoped that the purpose of this debate was to connect the dots so as to determine how we got to this water crisis, and then help one another to come up with possible solutions to avert the calamities thereof. But I was wrong to think like that. The reality has dawned on me that this DA-led administration pretends never to be wrong, and that anything bad happening here is somehow a consequence of national government. While we are busy here playing to the gallery, the distressed families across the province are looking at us, hoping for a way forward. The water crisis is real, and it has placed people's lives and livelihood at risk. This is not a subject matter to play politics with. Clearly, there is no time for political grandstanding. Let us work to find amicable solutions and save lives. In 1994, the ANC and its alliance partners came up with a policy framework known as the Reconstruction and Development Program. Chapter 2 of the document addresses the importance of meeting the basic needs. It claims that water as a natural resource should be made available in a sustainable manner to all South Africans. The document continues to emphasize the fact that the fundamental principle of our water resources policy is the right to access clean water, water security for all. The RDP recognizes the economic value of water and the environment and advocates an economically, environmentally, and politically sustainable approach to the management of our water resources and the collection, treatment, and disposal of water. I am deeply hurt, disappointed, and very angry at the way the DA mismanaged the situation. The central argument is that this is a manufactured crisis for this greedy government to cash in on the drought through emergency procurement measures and other underhand dealings. I also firmly believe that it was exacerbated by this government's segregationist mentality. While the drought and water shortages affected everyone, the focus of interventions was wholly on the challenges of white farmers, ignoring the rest of the populace. As much as it is true that the less than normal rainfall over the years, partly as a result of climate cycle changes, is to blame for this crisis. But I want us to pay attention to the role the provincial government played to aggravate the crisis. As a point of departure, I want to point out that warning signs have been there as early as 2015, when rainfall was below winter average, leading to dropping in dam levels. When many were starting to panic, the members on that side urged us not to panic about the issue of water in the province. Professor Kevin Winter suggests that there are three major contributory factors to our water crisis. They are population growing faster than storage, possibly high consumption preceding current drought, and changes due to human-caused global warming. For every reasoning person, it is easy to see that the provincial government could have acted sooner to avert the crisis. It becomes more concerning to find that Professor Mike Miller suggested in 2007 that the city should implement the Table Mountain group of aquifers or an argumentation of supply into the Full-Flayed Dam from the Berg River. Some of these plans include drilling into aquifers, include the Table Mountain aquifer, recycling water, as well as the installation of desalination plants. The DA-led provincial government and their mayor have been found wanting to such an extent that they resort to lying and misleading the country about their efforts. They claim that part of their so-called emergency water schemes include a small-scale desalination package plant located along Cape Town's northwestern coastline with a yield of approximately 2 million litres per day. This is an untruth. This project was championed by Eskom at Kuberg Power Plant and not the DA-led government. Locally and provincially, they have nothing to show for 4 years other than singing, save water and hope for miracle rains. This DA-led government in the province has put every citizen's right to health, food and sanitation at risk. They have failed for years to act upon the decline of our dam levels. The Constitution of the South Africa, in its Bill of Rights, Section 27, provides that everyone has the right to have access to water and that reasonable measures must be taken to realize these rights. Their relentlessness will be a basis for pursuing a negligence claim against this administration. They failed to meet the basic standards of a reasonable person who could have foreseen this crisis and should have prevented it. They claim to be brand good governance, yet their conduct amounts to no care, skill or diligence which is required from an elected government. 315 million rand will be spent on drilling in the city and province's groundwater at an unsustainable rate, which will lead us back to 2010 in Beaufort West, with empty dams and no rainfall to replenish the earth. No wonder Premier Helen Zille waited for 4 years to implement the disaster state. Notice so they don't have to answer questions of fruitless expenditure and environmental damage. Here, the DA-led government has shown their lack of planning. when they were warned 7 years prior to the 2010 Beaufort West water crisis, when dams supplying that town went completely dry. There have been scientists that have argued the validity of extracting groundwater, citing that it was completely unsustainable. Their findings were not able to convince other than these aquifers do not get replenished at equal rates as they are sucked dry. In conclusion, the City of Cape Town warned residents on Monday that even tougher curbs are on the way. Level 4B restrictions would reduce the city's collective water use target to 500 million litres a day, even though residents have not yet achieved the present 600 million litre objective. Dam storage levels rose by 1.3 percentage points to 24.5% in the past week, but consumption averaged 630 million litres a day. The city has done nothing to force residents to use less water. It is becoming unrealistic to do nothing other than ban people from using water. I thank you.
Order. Thank you, Member. The Honourable Christians.
Deputy Speaker, more than 20 years ago, in 1995-96, the Department of Water Affairs and Forestry started researching and analyzing the future needs of water resources in the Cape region, and a comprehensive evaluation of options was undertaken, followed by extensive environmental and social impact studies in 96 and 97. Speaker, the City of Cape Town was warned repeatedly and clearly knew since 1998, almost 20 years ago, about the reality of changing rainfall patterns, the growing risk of extreme weather events and floods like floods and droughts, and the impact of the growing population would have on our scarce water resources. In 1998, the former CMC, the Cape Metropolitan Council, appointed a manager to oversee the water demand management. In the same year, the CMC developed and adopted a water demand managing strategy and policy. Speaker, there was also, the CMC also appointed a consortium to carry out 1999 an integrated water resource planning study, which was published in 2001. Speaker, the study's recommendations were, firstly, leakage repair. The city is still struggling to meet the customer request when it comes to leak repairs. Some take days, some take weeks, and in Mitchell's Plain, one resident tells us that they waited for 7 months recently for a leakage repair. They spoke about the promotion of private boreholes, the introduction of water-efficient fittings, and also the promotion of grey water usage. Speaker, the city, if implemented these recommendations properly, if they've put a budget to it, we would not have been in this crisis. I thank you.
Thank you. Minister Brudel.
Honourable Speaker, Honourable Premier, Cabinet colleagues, members of the legislature, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity. I would like to start by thanking once again the disaster relief workers in particularly and everyone else in general for their roles in tackling the worst natural disaster in South Africa's history. This was not perhaps the worst disaster in terms of monitoring damage estimates, but the number of people evacuated safely and the scale of resource mobilization is unprecedented. The fact that we were able to limit fatalities and damage, particularly with regards to the Knysna fires, was only due to the incredible efforts by people and entities involved. Tragically, 12 people lost their lives as a result of this disaster. 5 people in the Cape Metro area and 7 in the Knysna area, including 1 firefighter. I would like to add my condolences to those already expressed to their families and friends and colleagues. Ons is baie dankbaar om te kan sê dat die situasie in Knysna en elders is nou onder beheer en ons is nou in die proses om Knysna en die groter Eden distrik te herbou. Op 7 tot 16 Julie is die Knysna Oesterfees en ek wil ieder en elk aanmoedig om die Knysna te ondersteun. Die ekonomie moet herstel en mense moet terugkeer werk toe en toerisme is so 'n belangrike deel van daardie opbouproses. Agbare Speaker, water en droogte. And it's a shame that the Honourable Diana comes here with a political speech on an issue like water and drought and came here with no solutions. You touch on population growth. What is your solution to population growth? What is your solution to population growth? Do you want to put up borders? Do the ANC want to put up borders? Or can we ask, Honourable Speaker, that the reason why we've got a population growth and the expected population growth of nearly 2 million people in the next 15 to 20 years is maybe because the Western Cape is being governed so well? It's maybe because if you look at results like the Auditor General's report, and you look at the results that 80% of the municipalities in this province received a clean audit of 80%. Second to us is KZN with 18%. Third is Eastern Cape with 16%. It's no wonder the people flock to the Western Cape, Honourable Speaker. But we will be ready for them. We will, through good governance, secure the resource. We will, through good governance, protect the rights of the poorest of the poor, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, agbare Speaker, tans is die damvlakke op 23%, wat skrikwekkend is. Agbare Speaker, as ons nie die damvlakke teen 75% vol kry teen Oktober nie, gaan ons ernstige probleme hê in die somermaande. Ons weet dit deur goeie beplanning, ons weet dit deur 'n goeie rampbestuurstelsel en daarom sal ons beplan daarvoor. Die provinsie is steeds 'n rampgebied wat betref die droogte en ons werk hard met alle rolspelers om oplossings langtermyn sowel as korttermyn te bewerkstellig. Intussen, agbare Speaker, is ons nou in ons winterreënvalseisoen en ons verwag en daar is verwagte reënvooruitsigte. Die vraag is hoeveel wat ons nie kan verseker nie. Dit is van kardinale belang dat ons almal besef dat water spreek tot menswaardigheid en dit is krities vir ons ekonomiese groei en ontwikkeling van enige land en enige provinsie. Dit is my prioriteit om te kyk na die medium en langtermyn om watersekerheid in die Weskaap aan te spreek. En dit sluit in.
Minister, just an oomblik. Honourable Diana, you've had your opportunity to speak. You can't have a running commentary with the minister now. Please allow the minister to proceed with his speech. Minister, you may proceed.
Dankie, agbare Speaker. Dit is van kardinale belang dat almal besef dat water spreek tot menswaardigheid en dat dit is krities vir ons ekonomiese groei en die ontwikkeling van ons land en ons provinsie. Dit is my prioriteit om te verseker medium en langtermyn dat daar genoeg water sal wees en dat die hulpbron beskerm word. Of dit beteken ontsouting of grootskaalse herwinning van afvalwater, sal ons besluit wanneer ons watersbestuursplan voltooi is. Maar dit is duidelik dat ons 'n nuwe era betree waar ons ernstige besluite geneem sal moet word. Ek wil dit ook hier duidelik stel dat watersekerheid sekere implikasies gaan hê. Een van daardie implikasie is 'n koste-implikasie. Water kan in die toekoms baie duurder raak, agbare Speaker. Dit sal ook met die huis gedeel word, soos wat die planne vasgestel en vasgemessel word. Agbare Speaker, die realiteit is dat klimaatsverandering is besig om teen 'n vinnige pas te versnel en dit gaan oor die komende 20 jaar groot eise aan die leiers van hierdie provinsie stel. Ons gaan moet vooruit beplan en ons sal moet dinge anders aanpak of daar is min kans dat ons vir ons mense goeie nuus sal hê. Die Weskaap is in besonder heel kwesbaar vir klimaatsverandering. Daarom sien ons die toename in rampe en brande en droogtes wat ons nou mee sit. Hierdie dinge raak ons ekonomie en sosiale ontwikkelingsprogramme negatief en ons sal al meer die storie vooruit moet loop om voorbereid te kan wees vir die toekoms. Honourable Speaker, some of the medium and long-term interventions to address supply in water to the Western Cape and was also discussed in this House 2 weeks ago by the Honourable Minister Meyer. These include the Berg River Fuel Flow Augmentation Scheme, which will divert surplus winter water into the Fuel Flow Dam. The estimated cost of this project is 500 million rand. It is extremely important that early and urgent decisions are taken on the next projects to be implemented and that these are seen through to the end. This will be done in cooperation with our national government, who are the implementing agents in these projects. The environmental assessment for the Berg River Full Flow Augmentation Scheme is already approved a week ago. Western Cape province will receive below normal rainfall. That's a fact. We need 3 to 4 years of good rainfall to return to a normal situation. That's also a fact. While some of the scientists, you say we must build dams, but it was your ANC minister who said 2 years ago that the reason why we've got water shortages is because that we've got 2 big dams. So, Honourable Speaker, the ANC is divided even on water. They don't know where to plan and where they want to take this country to. Scientists are not clear, and they acknowledge the fact that they don't have tools to predict water and rainfall patterns exactly, and that makes it very difficult for our planning. So there's scientific consensus, Honourable Speaker, that the Western Cape will become relatively drier as climate systems adjust with climate change driving by global warming. In the Western Cape, we're busy with the response, Honourable Speaker. We've identified the risk areas. We determine what interventions is needed. We're busy with the costing of those interventions. We determine the funding models that needs to be in place and then how to roll that out. We're also busy looking at water restrictions and how we can implement emergency restriction measures right through the province so that you don't get one municipality on a 4 level and the other one on a level 1. Groundwater management, appointment of geohydrologists is already ongoing, and the appointment process is fast-tracked. Emergency measures, the EIA fast-tracking process is in place. We look at the health system, the exploration, the drilling, the equipment of water treatment on site, Honourable Speaker, to see to it that our health system is protected. The education system determine the status, the tanks on site currently close to the ground water systems, and then where we need to also to put boreholes so that we can protect the education system. We also look at governing buildings and how we can use the water more productively within our government buildings, and also the government departments together put up a drought committee that will in the future manage our drought situation. This was launched January 2016, the task team, and they will focus on drought and water management. Honourable Speaker, we have also done an assessment in this province. Each and every municipality was assessed on what we need to put in place so that we can support them and see to it that they don't run out of water. The total cost of that project will be 5 plus minus 5 billion rand. The Cabinet, it was presented to Cabinet on the 31st of May based on the drought risk register. We also, Honourable Speaker, completed emergency water provision planning. We've got 60,000 litres of bottled water immediately available for distribution. We've also put in an application for 20 water tankers to the Department of Water Affairs that's on standby. We've also got a borehole project which we can roll out within 2 weeks. We're also busy and we finalised the tender of geohydrologists for the drilling and managing of groundwater. That's going to be crucial. And then the legal framework in which we will be able to enforce drought measurements on our municipalities. We've then also called for water indaba in this province, and the declaration was signed by the Premier, the Provincial Minister, as well as all our mayors across this province. Honourable Speaker, the
Minister,
declaration
order.
was the result.
Your time has almost expired, Minister. You must just finish off
If
now.
I just can highlight, thank you for that, Honourable Speaker. The purpose of the pledge was to enhance water conservation efforts, including the adopting water-sensitive urban design planning principles to reduce the per capita demand in our water, reducing water leakages, recognising the need to manage groundwater wisely, diversify water supply, protecting the quality and integrity of the source. Legislative overall in areas where needed and driving our water innovation. Honourable Speaker, we've got a very competent team working on this drought, and with the cooperation of the public, we will survive.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Honourable Nikusela.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, let us celebrate our water heroes. Speaker, today I would like to celebrate our hero, my hero, a 46-year-old Mtutuzeli Zebukwene from Makaza, Kailicha. It is dedicated to him because this man is a living example of what it means to save water. Section 27, subsection 1A of our Constitution says every person has a right to access to water. And during my recent interaction with him, he said that he wants to ensure that he does his bit to ensure that he saves water and all other people have access to water. Speaker, when I heard this and saw how sincere he was, I immediately became emotional. I became emotional because I could see how sincere this man is to what he's doing to save water. This man is a general worker and earns a low wage and has over the last 4 years taken the initiative to save water. Allow me to inform this House of how innovative Mr. Zebukwene is. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, since 2013, Mtutuzeli and his household have been using recycled water to flush his toilet. Whenever they take a bath, bahlambele komini, abanashawa okanye bath. They use the water, and the water they use to wash dishes. They throw the water into a tank and then manually pour the water into the ablution system to flush the waste. Not only has this led to the household saving liters of water, but it has also helped in reducing the family's water utility bill. And he said that he's been amazed at how much he's been able to save, both in the amount of water and his utility bill. Honorable Deputy Speaker, Mtutuzeli told me that when he first heard about the possible water crisis a few years ago, he took it upon himself that it will not be that they can continue with business as usual. He then started this exercise of putting his own water-saving mechanism. And this father says no person should go without water. Speaker, this gentleman is my hero and an example of what can be done by each and every individual in this province. One's status should not in any way determine how they should behave, neither their circumstances nor their background. And this is an epitome of what we can do working together to ensure that we are better together in delivering better services to our people. And this further entrenches the culture of responsibility on the part of residents when we talk about service delivery. Section 36 of the Bill of Rights talks about limitation and the responsibility in the rights that we enjoy, and that is exactly what Mr. Zebukwene is doing in Makaza. Speaker, my hero, this 46-year-old man from Makaza in Kailija, not in Bishop's Court, not in Tableview, not in Gordons Bay, in Kailija, in Makaza, he is saying, and I'm saying this here, he says government must help other people to ensure that they learn, because he has only limitations. He can only do what he's doing in his home. And I'm challenging this House that we go out as constituency leaders, when we go to constituency period now and ensure that many more Zebukwana are there and doing the same thing that Mtutuzeli is doing. Because of this initiative and willingness, I've decided, Honorable Deputy Speaker, that myself, as the chairman of the Standing Committee on Local Government, I'm going to invite the Standing Committee members and say, let us go to Mr. Zebukwane's home to see how he has come about to do this exercise. And I am certain there is many more other Mtutuzelis out there that we are not aware of. As a house, we should be engaging with various communities, including organizations, leaders, and ordinary members in our communities, and as well as ward councillors, and identify who are these other Mtutuzelis that are there who have not come to the party in this kind of an exercise. There's an opportunity here, Honorable Deputy Speaker, to recognize this man's effort by helping him to automate his system, which he currently manages manually. We need to identify, celebrate, and in fact reward our residents for the difference they make in our water scarce situation. In conclusion, Honorable Deputy Speaker, I want to say this. The ANC is very disappointing. They are telling us that you must implement some kind of a permitting system if you want to come to the Western Cape. They are saying that you must do that in 23 years down democracy.
Order.
We will not do that, Deputy
Your time has
Speaker.
expired.
We will never do that as this Democratic Alliance. Thank you. Thank you.
Order. 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 I want the House to come to order before I see the Honourable Bierwinkel. Honourable Leader, I'm talking to you as well. Honourable Bierwinkel.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Let me, from the outset, acknowledge the member of the public that Member Mkatsela has just raised now, but it's nothing new, because we all do it all the time, every day. But I would also not like to go all over the show. I want to come home to things more closer to us. As we are predominantly all from the metro area and few others amongst us from outer rural areas, we are all subjected to the punitive measures put in place by the City of Cape Town because they woke up too late to a looming disaster they were warned about 10 years ago. And here's an article by Professor Mike Miller, Slaapstad, not sucked out of our thumbs. Hoekom is Kaapstad eintlik sonder water? Want amptenare wou nie luister nie. That article is for your consumption. And that is why it's called Slaapstad. In fact, experts say we should rather spend our time to learn from the mistakes that were made. In fact, Cape Town managed us to the brink of this disaster. While some brag about clean audits, may I remind all that that does not bring us better water management. Exactly. Councillor Limburg identified high water consumption, faulty meters and leaking taps as part of the reason for the crisis of this ensuing water crisis that we are facing. Speaker, if I did not leave here last night almost at 8 p.m. after a disaster scoper meeting and had to leave home this morning at 5:15 to avoid adding to pollution on heavy traffic, I would have produced numerous photographs of unattended running taps, car washes that continue unabated, washing of cars with hose pipes, and in some cases, even watering of gardens to prove that monitoring of abuse of water usage is not happening in our informal settlements. In this very building, I've not seen any measures put in place to seriously curb unnecessary water usage in toilets and at taps. Those of us who travel regularly to our constituencies can attest to garages and shopping centres where faulty toilet cisterns run continuously, where hose pipes are used to wash cars and water gardens, where the seriousness regarding our scarce resource of where is the seriousness regarding our scarce resource of dwindling water levels? Only punitive measures are put in place for households who do not comply with level 4 restrictions. However, no incentive for those who do comply. The rich who have rolling gardens have declared that it's cheaper for them to pay the imposed fines than to eventually have to do a new landscape from scratch. When solar heating systems like solar geysers were introduced, an incentive of a percentage reduced price encouraged users to install them. Here's another opportunity for job creation with water tank manufacturers. Maybe supply complying households with a water tank as appreciation for their cooperation. Or encourage companies who sink boreholes to reduce the price for those who comply. It's all very well now, after the horse has bolted, to sign declarations with municipalities, but do they have the manpower to implement what is expected of them? How much will be appropriated to assist the furthest flung municipalities in their quest to adhere to these requirements? There are two things that you can theorize about, but never concretely confirm, and that is human behavior and God's will with nature. The 75 million hurriedly sourced from the reserve fund includes a hospital in Swartland, but for the rest, most of it was for Knysna. Are there new preventative measures and infrastructure such as fire trucks being planned for each municipality, seeing as how most disaster management facilities are stationed at district level, which is normally many kilometers away? There's a huge education gap that needs to be filled to empower and enlighten people about the dangers facing us. And so again, a public participation opportunity presents itself in that youth can be trained to do these home visits to inform communities about the crisis, but also to incentivize them by paying them a stipend for the work they do. We must remember that the poor don't necessarily read newspapers or concern themselves with environmental issues because their priorities are different. They worry about where their next meal will come from. A simple initiative like Drop a Block, which entails putting a brick into your toilet cistern, in this way reducing the quantity of water it draws back in. Another opportunity for youth to become involved in curbing the looming disaster is not being implemented as an imperative across municipalities. This as opposed to the unhygienic suggestion of not flushing after a number 1. Yet in every toilet in this building, there's still a notice behind each door to ask whether you have flushed properly to keep our shared services clean. Contradiction not implemented right here under our noses. Professor Mike Miller from Wits School says, and may I just read what he says because I would never be able to say it better than him. Excuse me? When did he say it? The 19th of April 2017. This year's crisis has been predicted for at least a decade and they failed to act. He also says, 10 years ago, the Department of Water Affairs and Forestry published a reconciliation study to show how Cape Town could get better water needed to meet rising demand. And we've heard about the Berg River plan that was spoken about. 20 options were ranked in order of cost and readiness, and the information is on public website, so no one can claim ignorance. Cape Town seemed determined to live up to its laid-back reputation. Cape Town's case highlights the need for greater public engagement with the plans discussed that are only discussed in the recesses of the Cape Town City Hall. The challenges remain. So rather engaging in media, rather that business engages in water stewardship activities to pretty up its sustainability reports, business should treat water seriously and put it on its board agendas as a substantive item. The board should ask, how much water do we have? How much will we need? Who is ensuring that it will be available when we need it? If they fail to do this, water crisis will appear on agendas and shareholders will hold them to account for its effect on their bottom lines. Let me continue. Of course, there's a bigger picture, Deputy Speaker, that the economy and business who cannot carry out their core function if it entails the use of copious amounts of water. This declared disaster sees no colour or political affiliation. So no blame game in that regard, but what we can lay the blame squarely is at the complacency displayed by officials over the years in spite of warnings and predictions that by 2015 alternative measures must be in place. It is this retroactive after-the-fact planning that has put the City of Cape Town in the mess and the rest of the province through complacency of the departments who should have insisted on spending the budgets on what the reports were telling them were imminent. Over the years, there have been many meetings and reports compiled, but implementation was just not prioritized, and the City of Cape Town falsely believed in 2014 that their water demand management plan had been successful. In a later report, they admit that intervention should have started even before 2014 to mitigate the risk of what we are now facing. It is clear that the rainy seasons, as experienced in the past, has not repeated itself over the years due to climate change and global warming, resulting in dams not filling up as was expected. However, human behavior was not factored into possible outcomes, neither was a growing population, putting more pressure on scarce water resource factored in. Bottom line, Speaker, the City of Cape Town and this province were given fair warning with possible alternatives also presented. All of this fell on deaf ears, and today we are all punished with the same restrictions, and future generations will judge the DA and their leaderships for the lack of this basic commodity. I thank you.
Thank you. I see Honourable Minister Windy.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, my speech is this pile of paper over here, but I'm going to start with these two pieces of paper over here because I wanted to just perhaps answer one or two of the issues as raised in this debate, because of course it is a debate. I think the first one, when the ANC stood up initially, said this is not a time for politics and not a time for grandstanding, but then went straight on to say the DA has mismanaged the situation. So, I mean, you must decide whether you're coming here and making a political speech or not. But that then says, let's ask and let's determine what was said in that political speech. Three issues were raised: the Table Mountain Aquifer, recycling, and the desalination plant. Now, first of all, when we talk about the Table Mountain Aquifer, in the Honourable Dijana's first speech, she speaks about this, but then she also says, but 300 million rand has been made available for the drilling of boreholes. We need to have a bit more research on this. It's not just about drilling of boreholes or even the deep water aquifer. This is much more complicated than all of this. We've learned huge lessons on the West Coast with potato farmers that have just extracted groundwater, and now that whole aquifer is full of salt water. We can't just make these rash statements here. We have to have proper plans in place to deal with these kind of things. Recycling, I will deal with it just now when I get to my part of the speech. And of course, the desalination plant, we do know that the city's got a tender going out now for 100 megalitre plant per day, and that's for now in August. We also know that, and you heard the Honourable Chairman of the Standing Committee, the Honourable Schaefer, who really spoke about where water stands and whose responsibility overall these long-term water plans come from. We then heard the second speaker of the ANC talking about the 10-year plan. But overlaid in that 10-year plan is 100-year drought. And of course, all of these things have to come together in that partnership. But I think nothing is so blatantly clear as when we hear the real numbers. The numbers of the 2.5 billion rand that's been made available nationally for drought, and when we see the measly few million that end up, first of all, in this province, or let alone anywhere else in the country. We hear the reports of the Department of Water and Sanitation. This is not the city or the province, the Department of Water and Sanitation. We hear that they themselves are bankrupt. We also see the kind of money that they allocate or the kind of points that these head officials are making around whether it is necessary to actually invest these big numbers into these dams, yes or no. Do you know that I asked the question around the Clan William Dam, that very department? I said, how long have we been waiting for these tenders to be awarded and this dam to start being built? Guess when they are looking at the first possible chance to build this dam? Next year, April. Now, why does that date sound strange to you? Because that is the start of next year's financial year, because they've already spent last year's money and this year's money. And where do they spend this money? So I'll tell you what, I'll give you one space to go and have a look at. When you are doing oversight again and you go up the West Coast, go to Lambert's Bay. There's a desalination plant that was built there 3 years ago. It has not produced 1 liter of water. Not one. Guess who built the desalination plant? Zuma's son. He got the contract to build that desalination plant. Now let's go and have some oversight up there and see what happens around building desalination plants and why the National Department is not able to deliver on these 10-year plans, because the money has gone to other things. If we did not go to National Parliament and write letters from this government to the National Department of Water Affairs, the canals feeding the Voelvlei Dam would have still been full up to the top of sand, and those catchment weirs would have still been full. In actual fact, they still are fairly full. They managed to clear a little bit of the catchment area in those weirs, and then they ran out of money again. This is the National Department of Water, whose job it is to fill our dams. So don't come here and play politics when you know that your own department is the biggest failure in this space. So, Deputy Speaker, let me get to what I wanted to talk about. I've got 2 hats here. I've got one hat.
Order.
I've got one hat. The Guptas and the Zumas have got the right to tender, yes. Hey. Anyway, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I've got 2 hats here. The first hat is the agricultural hat. And the first declaration of disaster was in February 2016 in this province. That means the work done in 2015 led us to declare a disaster in February 2016. From that date to this date, in the agricultural space where you heard about the 2.5 billion rand that's been available, we have received a measly 12 million rand as a disaster recovery plan for agriculture in this province. The province that produces 60% of South Africa's agricultural exports. A measly 12 million rand. And guess what? When we got allocated that money, we got told by the National Department, you can't spend the money, we will spend it and we will put the tenders out, we will decide who gets that money and how it will be spent in your province. It had 0 impact. It really was a waste of time. And so, at the end of the day, we've put the 96 million rand already.
Order. Honourable Chief Whip.
Yeah, Deputy Speaker, I do understand that they're experiencing a provincial disaster of their own on the other side there. But I really ask that, despite their drought of members over there, that they please give our members a chance to state their case.
Yes, I take your point. It is a valid point of order, and I agree with the point of order, Honourable Makaleni. Please refrain from making comments all the time. It's one thing to do an interjection, but when it becomes a running commentary, it's totally different. Member, you may continue, Minister.
Thank you very much. We've put the 96 million rand already. We've budgeted the next 73 million rand for this financial year and spent 60 million of it so far. We're the ones that have procured in this financial year the 105 tons of feed already for this latest round. And we're the ones that are already preparing for the other implications of drought in agriculture, and that's the disease that follows. When you have dry, no rain, etc., there are other implications in the system. We are the ones that are doing that. We are putting it in place. It's about management. So then let's come to the next part, which is about water management across the province. So we've heard a lot of stuff to be said about the City of Cape Town and wastage of water. And of course, every single drop of water that gets wasted is a drop of water that should not be wasted. We need to have serious plans in place. We did a study through Green Cape. This is the document. It's called the Market Intelligence Report 2017. It looks at the analysis of the existing water scenario that we find ourselves in across the country and where the business opportunities lie. But when it comes to water wastage, you know that the City of Cape Town's water wastage, or the non-revenue water and the leakages, sits generally between 14 and 17%, which sits on a global average norm of best-run cities. When you have a look at the province, and at the country, and of course, generally across the country, we're sitting at over 30% with wastage in water. When you have a look at the GIS mapping of how water is managed across South Africa, and you notice on this map, there's a section that's quite green and a whole lot that's very red. That shows you the best management and the worst management. You can overlay who runs those municipalities and those towns politically, where it's green and where it's red. In the Western Cape, there's one red, Kanaland. One red. But of course, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I urge everyone in this House to perhaps go and have a look at this market intelligence report, because it does a few things. It shows us where we're going wrong and where we need to fix things. But more importantly, it shows us...
Order, Honourable Olivier.
More importantly, it shows us where some of the opportunities lie. At the moment in the Western Cape economy, industrial water for reuse, in other words, the opportunity in businesses for recycling, the value is about 600 million rands worth of business. But in potable water reuse, which is in our households, the opportunity is a 4.5 billion rand economy. 4.5 billion rand economy. And so that's a massive opportunity for our SMME sector to really get involved in finding ways and solutions for us to reuse water. If the city's using 600 million litres or 800 million litres a day, how do we reuse 400 million litres of that? And those are opportunities for the SMME sector, for the private sector, to find solutions for us, and people are prepared to spend that money. The Honourable Beerwinkel asked that businesses need to put it on their boards. Our study in 2016 showed that 94% of companies in the province reported water as a direct risk to their operations. It's the highest in the world, and it features in all of their reporting and risk management systems in those businesses, 94%. South Africa's average annual rainfall is about half of the global average rainfall. So we know already that water is a big issue. And when issues about supply and demand or risks sit in systems, that's when economies can be built. And just as through the energy game changer and through the work that's been done in this province around energy, there is massive, massive opportunity around water for economic solutions, for innovation, and ways in which we can start to create a new economy in this region. We can build businesses, SMMEs, and entrepreneurs can find solutions not only for us right here in South Africa, but for Africa and the world. And I'm pretty certain that that is going to come out of what's happening at the moment. The latest statistic on grey water systems, and we can measure it through the number of water tanks that are being sold to these grey water systems, is those businesses' growth rate in the last 4 months has been just under 1,500%. Massive growth. So that shows you the opportunity in that 4.5 billion rand market space, which is obviously where we all need to find the best enabling environment. And then lastly, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I want to use this opportunity to thank those individuals, like Honourable Mkasela spoke about, to thank those businesses that are finding the opportunities, but also those businesses and people that are doing the right thing, that are putting those buckets in their showers, that are really, really saving water wherever possible, that are putting in those grey water systems. Our hotels. There's a hotel group in this city that they started giving me a hard time around water and what are we doing about it around the messaging. And you will see as you walk through the airport, it hits you in the face because there are banners and posters everywhere about, remember, this is a water scarce space. We're really trying to get that message out as strongly as possible. But these hotels, for months now, have removed the plugs from their baths. You cannot bath in our hotels at the moment. You can only shower. And there's a big sign in every one of those showers that's laminated that says, remember, this is water scarce space. Do not waste our water. And I want to say thank you very much to these businesses And then, of course, to those households across our whole province that do the right thing, that use less and less water, that are being water-wise. I want to thank every single one of them for helping us make the difference and save the water, especially through winter, so we can start to build as much reserve as possible for next season. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes the debate on this subject. We move on to interpellations. The first interpellation has been withdrawn. We go to interpellation 2. And I see again the Honourable Minister Windy.
Sure. A bit quick there. I will find my papers. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and of course to the Honourable Chacham for the question. I know that this is not the first time you've asked this question this year, but I'm happy to again reply to this question for debate. An improved answer, yes, we hope. First of all, from the Department of Economic Development and Tourism, to promote inclusivity through the Project Kulisa growth strategy, we have targeted specific initiatives to grow these sectors of our economy which demand lower and mid-tier skills. In tourism, entry-level skills are in great demand. In oil and gas, as well as agri-processing, low skills as well as semi-skills and fully skilled jobs are required. And of course, that really speaks to the skills game changer and the 32,500 artisanal and apprenticeship skills that we've put in place. And of course, perhaps to say that we're already 7,500 jobs into that 32,500 target, and I think going really, really well. B, the achievement of employment equity is outlined in the employment equity plan of the department, and that's 1 April 2015 until 31 March 2020. The EE plan identifies annual targets that would be incrementally achieved through this 5-year goal that's set. I've got a very detailed answer to you in this, and I think I'm going to have to give you this document when I'm finished, because if I spend all my time reading these answers, I've got 4 pages still to go just on this first part of the question, I'm going to run out of time. But what I do want to say is that during the 2016-17 financial year, the following results were achieved in senior management staff. A, 5 internal promotions, of which 4 were from designated groups, and B, the appointment of 2 SMS members, both from designated groups. The department continues to strive towards a demographically representative and equitable workforce. But of course, at the same time as we're doing that, it is a merit-based workforce, and you can see in the results that this department achieves in this province. Then Department of Agriculture. During 2014, the Cabinet of the Western Cape Province adopted 5 provincial strategic goals. And of course, within these goals, again, Project Kulisa, 3 sectors, and in those sectors, agri-processing, tourism, and oil and gas. We then took the next step and went through further an analytical consultation process to develop interventions in these 3 sectors. We wanted to capture a larger share of the global halal market, increase exports in wine and brandy to China and Angola, and improve local production capacity in domestic and key strategic markets. Again, this talks to skills and intervention in skills and training. This talks to us making sure that we are intervening directly in the job space, because if we have a look at the jobs growth numbers, and if we look by 2016 fourth quarter labour force statistics South Africa, we found that there are 253,293 jobs in primary agricultural sector in the Western Cape, 27.1% of South Africa, and a further 135,942 in the agri-processing sector.
Order,
and
Minister.
over that period, we put another 127,000 jobs into the economy in those 2 spaces in the Western Cape.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Honourable Chacham.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I was expecting that answer because the Minister focuses on job only. When we talk of inclusive growth, it does not only talk to jobs, but it also talks to how do we change the economic landscape created by apartheid. How do we make sure that we share the economic space and make sure that people become involved in the mainstream of creating jobs themselves, not only job seekers, Minister. Because historically, the Western Cape benefited from the apartheid policies of investing more in non-African communities. Since it is a province with minority African population and no homelands areas at all. As a result, since the transition to democracy, it has high employment levels in terms of standard binational, you know it. It's not because of DA. You also know that in terms of the infrastructure that we mentioned about the water, the leakages, Western Cape has always been higher than all other provinces because of the legacy of apartheid that we were in, not because of DA. It has, it also inherited the overall growth in the Western Cape has generally been slightly above, Minister, in terms of South Africa, but the economy of the Western Cape continues to widen. The gap between the poor and the rich continues to widen. We have not been able to close it. And the main, no. But the government under TA, Deputy Speaker, they will howl, they will do all other things, but in the main, they are unable to deal with the issue simply of making sure that black people do create a space and participate in creating the economy. You know that you can even mention the industries, the hotels that are being built here, just here in town. And then you must ask how many, I told son it's not black owned, they have shares. How many people, black in particularly, are participating in the space of the property development market?
Thank
It's
you,
very
Member.
few.
Your time has expired on this slot. You get another slot later on.
Hey, I wanted to
The
finish.
Honourable Schaefer.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I think the most important thing is how do you create an enabling environment for natural inclusion of growth to happen in an economy? And I found this document, I'm not quite sure why I had it. It's called Enterprising Cape, Building an Inclusive and Vibrant Economy. It's part of the Premier's policy brief. It was done by Futures Cape. And it really specifically speaks to how the Western Cape is being advised to build this inclusive economy. And I'd like to quote something. It says that it's a story of how the Western Cape, by strengthening its human capital, improving its business environment, and creating conditions conducive to greater innovation and entrepreneurship, can help foster inclusive growth while simultaneously becoming a vibrant economic hub for Africa as it escapes the middle income trap and achieves higher income status. And it says what you should do here. And I'd really like to speak a little bit more to this, because in the end of the day, you've got to make and create an enabling environment through policy. And if you don't create that space, you're never going to achieve what you're setting out here in this debate. And it says the potential policy targets, and let me quote, it talks about the economy. It says you must look at agri-processing. We do it. You must shore up manufacturing sector. We're doing that with places like the Atlantis, IDZ, etc. Support the tourism sector. We're doing that. Education, it talks about establishing early childhood development programs. We're doing that. It talks about health, lowering barriers to accessing healthcare. We're on target to doing that. It says in terms of the vibrant economy, lowering barriers to formalizing informal businesses. We're removing red tape. It talks about greater access to ICT broadband and quality and capacity and efficiency of economic development infrastructure like roads, rail, seaports, and airports. We're talking to that. And in terms of governance, it talks about reducing red tape for business and undertaking reforms to increase government effectiveness and regulatory quality.
Thank you, Member. Your time
This
has
is the
expired.
basis of building an inclusive
Thank
economy.
you. Honourable Chacha.
Thank you, Speaker. There's nothing new there, Speaker. That's the doctrine of the DA, is to make sure that it creates conducive. It does not want to intervene, in the economy. It only creates conducive platforms for the free market economy to flourish. That's what the DA stands for. But it does not want to make sure that it intervenes and make sure people benefit, because people who are not in your favor, people who are not actually siding with your policies in terms of making sure that they create an enabling environment for all other, because you would only do an enabling environment for your industries. No. So, of the bourgeois, of course. And the second part, when you create these industries, you do, and you,
Order.
you need to make sure when you create the conducive grounds, you also need to make sure that the private sector plays their role. What a minister has not told us here for quite some time, what is the private sector doing in making sure that they are part of this partnership? Because what we do not have here in the Western Cape, we do not have an inclusive culture of sharing in the economic benefits of this province. We are still laid back in the structural economic deficiencies of the past. This is what we want the minister to talk to.
Thank you, member. Your time has expired. Honourable Schaefer.
Yeah, I think through you, Deputy Speaker, to Honourable Chacha, really, the point of the matter is that we can't go around clinically creating or pushing and molding an economy in the way that you think it's going to grow, in the way you think you want it to grow. It doesn't work like that. It's like putting these agri-parks, spending billions on agri-parks, creating false markets. You can't do that. You have to create an environment that is open and will naturally progress into transformation and inclusive economy. We know that. And Member Chatham actually does know that, but we've seen time and time again that the private sector is truly committed to economic transformation, is truly committed to inclusivity, because we know that we cannot ever go back, and we would never want to go back. We want everybody to be a part of the future of the economy of this country. That's it.
Thank you, member. Honourable Chacham, your last opportunity.
Thanks,
Order.
Thank Deputy Speaker. Member Schaefer knows very well that the neoliberal agenda of the open markets actually does create impoverishment, does create poor communities, does create hunger, because the agenda of the neoliberals and the capitalists is to exploit. And make sure that they create the most profits out of the impoverished people. That's what the DA stands for. That's why the DA is unable to intervene in the private markets and tell them what to do. That's why the top management of most of these private institutions is still lily-whites and male in particular. And yet, the taxpayers' money is being used by the DA to create these conducive grounds for them. You look at our textile industry here in this province, it's gone. Yeah, you don't listen, that's my problem. I'm going to, that's the problem. It has gone down. It has gone down, and the problem with it, we have never, beside what we have now through our national minister in Atlantis, we have never seen what has our government in the province done to make sure that we improve the condition of the textile industry in our land. So we need to make sure. High Senator was Rob Davis, you know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister Windy.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I was actually just going to re-look at what this interpellations question was actually about. But it doesn't matter. We don't mind. We won't call it a new question. We'll react to it. I mean, the Honourable Chacham stands up and he says, this province, his words were, you've got the highest unemployment levels. And then he says, you've got a widening gap between rich and poor. Now, I'm not going to say that we do not have a gap between rich and poor, because we do have a gap, and it's too wide. We need to narrow it. But we've told him in this House before, the Gini coefficient, he needs to go and have a look at it, because it's in this province that it's the lowest. It's actually widening where the ANC governs. The unemployment rate, broad and narrow, the lowest in this province, and sometimes they brag about the unemployment rate in Limpopo as being the lowest in South Africa, but that's because it's got the highest number of people that have given up looking for work. I don't know who runs that province. But let's get back to some of these answers that talk about inclusive projects that we're busy with, because he says we don't intervene at all. So what about the 303 agricultural products that we've been involved in through the CAST program, where we allocate money through a process which is only in this province, where we use the commodity approach, and now National is saying we need to come and have a look at how you do it? What about the 104 mentors that we put in place through the same program? What about the 20 black fruit farmers that we've just put in place through the Jobs Fund? And of course, we also produced that Jobs Fund for black-owned farms in the Eastern Cape, because their government weren't able to do it. What about the 60% target that we set ourselves for these farms, of the 246 agricultural black-owned farms that we measured, and we got a 62% success rate through that process, again, where the National Department wants to come and see what we do. And then the Honourable Member comes and talks about inclusivity and says he should be standing here telling us about some of the projects that he's busy with within the ANC and other provinces where the exclusivity is really making a big difference. Because I don't see where Gigaba creates exclusivity where he gives visas to the Guptas. I don't see where Molefe creates inclusivity where he gives coal contracts to the Guptas. I don't see that. I see the BEE policies creating big, mega, singly owned black companies and not inclusive in the economy.
Your time has expired now. Order. We move on to the next interpellation. Interpellation 3. Minister Bredell.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you for the interpellation. All appointments made by municipalities must undergo a screening process during the appointment procedures, whether it be a policy provision or in terms of the regulations on appointment and conditions of staff of senior management, as published in Government Gazette 37245 on 1st of January 2014. The onus is on the current employer to disclose the details of the investigation for any charges against the official. It is then the relevant municipality's prerogative whether or not to consider such a candidate. Currently, there is no legislative provision that allows me to prevent a senior manager's reappointment at a different municipality on the basis that he or she has resigned before disciplinary proceedings against such individuals could be finalized at his or her previous employer. Having said this, municipalities are required to submit a schedule once a quarter which reflects all cases of misconduct and disciplinary cases in the respective municipalities, regardless of the outcome. This schedule is monitored by my department and forwarded to the National Minister to be placed on a database. All appointments, when sent to the National Minister, is verified against this list. Compliance of Section 57A, Section 7 of the Systems Act, municipalities are required to maintain a record that contains the prescribed information regarding the disciplinary proceedings of staff members dismissed for misconduct. As per Act, subsection 7, municipalities are required to submit a record of the above mentioned on a quarterly basis to the Provincial MEC of Local Government. In terms of Section 18, Section 7 of the regulations on appointment of conditions of employment of senior managers, municipalities are also required to submit a record contemplating subsection Regulation 6 must be submitted within 14 days of such a dismissal or resignation to the MEC of local government and the minister. It should also be noted that there are categories of misconduct and time periods that must expire before a person may be re-employed in a municipality in terms of Schedule 2 of said regulations. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable Nkosela.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The Deputy Speaker, I appreciate the responses and the participation by the Minister in this interpellation. The challenge that we are confronted with is that the more poorer the municipalities are, they are mainly linked, especially in terms of the character of and the behavior of the administration. It's linked mainly on how the administration behaves, especially those who are found guilty. I mean, those who are found, who are charged with misconduct. And then before they are charged, I mean, before they start serving, you know, they start facing the kind of disciplinary processes, then they begin to move to other municipalities. We've seen this in municipalities in Cederberg. We've seen it in the Greater Karoo. We've seen it in Beaufort, I mean in Oudtshoorn, and we've seen it in Canaland. And those are the kind of challenges that, when you look at what has happened in those municipalities and the charges that have been leveled against those administrators, it's gross misconduct and the violation of the Municipal Systems Act and the the Municipal Finance Management Act. But when you look at whether or not we're able to act, and the minister is correctly saying that there is no legislation that is in place to enable him and his department to ensure that they act against those violations. When a councillor is found guilty by the municipality and subsequently a recommendation is sent for the minister to act, we have seen that the minister has been acting. We've seen a number of ANC councillors that have been removed because they have been found to be corrupt in the province. But we have not been able to see municipal employees that have been found guilty and in fact being barred from seeking employment elsewhere. Hence you see these helicopters moving from this municipality, flying to another municipality and successfully getting employed. And that is an area that is a serious concern for us as the Standing Committee. And I would like this to be investigated in order to look at the legislation, Honorable Minister, through you, Speaker, that we can utilize, Deputy Speaker, in order to bar municipal employees from moving around whilst facing possible disciplinary action. And in fact, that action should be taken and successful litigation should be seen, and those who have been found guilty should be prosecuted and go to prison. Not this thing of corrupt people moving around and not going to prison.
Thank you, Member.
Where thieves belong.
Your time has expired. Die agbare Olivier.
We'll make space.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome the response from the MEC confirming that there's no legislation in place that allows him, as directed by the interpellation, restrict or prevent municipal employees under investigation for misconduct for seeking employment at different municipalities. We acknowledge that, and when you consult the Basic Condition of Employment Act, there's no provision for that in the Act, and therefore allows an employee who is under investigation to apply elsewhere and leave that service before actions or disciplinary actions proceed. And obviously, Deputy Speaker, there is no legislation to allow the minister to prevent that movement of employees from one municipality to the other. But the other side as well, Deputy Speaker, which we must not lose sight of, is the fact that that employee also has the right to be innocent until proven guilty. And therefore, an investigation does not necessarily mean that that employee is guilty of any misconduct. And therefore, you cannot prohibit such an employee, or any minister or MEC cannot restrict or prevent that employee from moving to another municipality. I think the issue here that needs to be investigated is the period or the length of the investigation. I think some of the investigations that takes place takes years and years to be finalized. And I think that's where maybe the MEC should investigate as to how and his counterparts can see to it that such investigations are fast-tracked, so that if an employee is guilty and found guilty, that employee is therefore in that manner prohibited to then move to a next municipality. But obviously...
Thank you. Member, your time has expired. Of your first slot, you will get another opportunity. Honourable Nkosela.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the seriousness here of this matter is that when there is corruption or elements of corruption, it contributes to poverty. It further creates disinvestment into the municipal area. And it exacerbates the lack of service delivery, that is the primary responsibility of municipalities in terms of Section 152 and Section 153 of the Constitution. Now, when you hear the ANC's response that no, don't touch them, don't buy them, the question is, we need to agree here as this Parliament whether we want to really deal with corruption in this country. Are we really serious about dealing with those who are flouting the rules of public office? And we've got to really value the public purse. And in doing so, we've got to put stringent measures that will enforce behavior, that will enforce the manner in which public officials are being held to account. Because the public purse is the primary responsibility of government. If you can't manage your money as government, you can't display that confidence in the public sector. That is why you see now in this country the downgrades, and you're seeing all of this negativity and the technical recession is because there's this character that we are not acting enough when we see corruption. And I'm not surprised, Deputy Speaker, because the ANC has failed to deal with Jacob Zuma and his shenanigans, where we found him and his cahoots being corrupt, and they come here and say he's corrupt,
Thank you, member.
but they don't act to show that it is seriously enough for the ANC.
Time has expired. Honourable Olivier. Honourable, you may continue.
Deputy Speaker, the interpellation, maybe we should remind the member. His own interpellation is asking as to whether the MEC here has, or his department can restrict or prevent an employee under investigation. Now, I'm not sure what the ANC is supporting here. His question is whether if you are under investigation, an employee, is there any measures to prevent you from moving from this municipality to the next one? You are not found guilty. It's not saying here, if you are found guilty. And I'm sure the ANC would not support that issue. But what we are saying, which the MEC is confirming, there is no powers vested in him to do that. But let's then see, because it seems that the ANC here is a problem. Let's look at Mossel Bay, where they are governing, where an official currently now, who was at the Liquor Authority as chief, who's now appointed at Mossel Bay as MM.
Order, member. Unfortunately, your 1 minute has expired. That's a long story, but you've just had 1 minute.
But
Your 1 minute
can I
is
just finish the line?
just quickly.
As,
I'll give
as
you
you
another
do with the
sentence.
rest, as Deputy Speaker. The CFO, the same. And this is in his own municipality where they are saying they're curbing corruption. But here, the other one is found guilty. The CFO
Order.
is found guilty
Thank
in
you,
a court
member.
of
Your-
law, but is appointed as a
your
CFO.
time has now really expired.
So if they then
Order.
prohibit corruption, this is what needs to happen. And
Order.
the DA
Order.
is the one that must
Order.
deal with corruption.
Order. Honourable Ifrit, I gave you some latitude there, but you abused that. When I say finish your sentence, I mean one sentence. I see the Honourable Nkosela.
I apologize, Speaker.
Deputy Speaker, we know that in many cases, when there is smoke, there's fire. And thank you very much. Honorable Deputy Speaker, we've also seen how the courts have come to recognize this very issue that we are dealing with. When we go to the courts and we approach the courts, we have seen that, in fact, those who have been flouting rules, and when there is a smoke, there is really serious fire. We have seen recently in Otsoren, the mayor and the officials that were working under his leadership, that were found guilty in the court of law, and they have been sentenced. And those are not any other mayors. They are ANC mayors, and they were all corrupt with your ANC officials. Now, what we need to do here is to say that the MEC, he has said here, the minister has said here to us, there is no legislation. Now, we need him to assist us as this parliament and find a way to legislate in this area in order to ensure that we are able to manage these kind of matters in the manner that will enhance confidence in government. We cannot have a situation where in Canaland, oh please, honorable member, don't do that. Through you, Deputy Speaker, protect me, please. The point here we have seen in Canaland, I won't make sense to you because Zuma has not made sense to all of us in this country. We have seen in Canaland, we have seen in Cedarburg, officials employed by the ANC, when the DA takes over, they run because we're going to start shaking and start dealing with the investigations. When we find them guilty,
Order,
they are long gone, employed
Order.
by another ANC municipality.
Order, your time has expired. I see Minister Bredell.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, yeah, it's a pity that Honourable Oliver starts off by saying that you're innocent until proven guilty, and then he quotes certain examples in the Mossel Bay and. That members are willing to go through the trial and they're busy with the process, and I think that's exactly the point of the Honourable Chairperson, and that is that when you enter the discipline domain, you must not be able to run away from being found guilty. And we will need to, if we want, and if we're serious clamping down on corruption, because we've seen it in so many cases, that the officials play the system. That when they're guilty, they play the system till the day before the hearing, and then they resign, and then they walk off, so nothing happens. And all that he's asking is that we must seriously, if we're serious about clamping down on corruption, that we need to look at legislation where, when you enter the disciplinary domain, that it's your choice to go to trial or not. You can't just run away. The municipality must then have the trial in your absence. But if you're found guilty, you will not be able to work within the domain. And I think that's a very reasonable request, and I think it's a very serious request if we're all serious about clamping down on corruption. If there's a couple of other things that we can be very serious about or implement if we're serious about clamping down on corruption, and that is, for instance, getting the internal audit unit independent within municipalities. Then we will see how corruption disappears within municipalities. The fact is that our smaller municipalities do struggle with certain competencies, engineering, CFOs, MMs, because of the comparison towards the scaling of the municipalities. And again, National made huge mistakes for not early enough investigating it, come up with a system that we can compare with the private system. They've just ignored all our inputs, and hopefully we will, in the second round now, get some sense of the system, because if we're not going to do that, we will not get quality officials going to rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. That brings us to the end of interpellations. We move on to the question paper. Questions for oral reply. The question standing over from 4 May. Honourable Botha to the Premier first. I see the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Department of Social Development and Education play the major role in providing services to disabled children of school-going age and who are not in formal schooling. The Department of Social Development provides funding to non-profit organisations, to provide support to children of school-going age with severe to profound intellectual disabilities. This support is based in centres operated by NPOs relating to, number one, the operational cost subsidy, that is a per capita subsidy, which includes overheads, administration, nutrition, and other programs. 2, post-funding subsidy for program implementers of the stimulation programs and carers. 3, a transport subsidy to assist with transport costs to and from the centres, as well as visits to hospitals and clinics and other priority visits which impact on the child's well-being. And 4, subsidies for therapeutic outreach services for children who are on the waiting list at centres or schools or are unable to attend a daily program due to the severity of their disabilities. This occurs at grassroots level in the community or the client's home. B, for support and capacity building of parents, primary caregivers and siblings of the children in the communities. C, for social work services including own services to follow up on children at home and those not attending centres. The Department has also developed a uniform referral pathway to assist professionals and community-level workers to be able to assess appropriately as well as develop appropriate intervention plans. These include all relevant stakeholders as well as engaging with the Western Cape Education Department for further interventions and applications to special needs schools or NPO facilities. Monitoring of the children is done at social worker level as part of the overall intervention plan, and this monitoring is done over the lifespan of the disabled person. The Western Cape Education Department prioritises children with disabilities who have high support needs and who are of school-going age for placement in special schools. 2 new special schools are scheduled for completion in July 2017 to cope with the ever-increasing demand for places due to various factors such as the increased incidence of certain disabilities and migration into the province due to the lack of support options elsewhere. Children with disabilities of school-going age who are out of school are usually children with severe and profound intellectual disabilities, which may be comorbid with other disabilities, often autism spectrum disorders. These children were the subject of a court order in 2010. The provincial government response to the order was to provide an intergovernmental program of support. The Western Cape Education Department established 4 multidisciplinary teams which support the children at special care centres. The NGO-managed special care centres have been funded by the Department of Health, and incrementally the Department of Social Development is taking over the funding. There are many out-of-school children in this category who may be recipients of social grants as well. Number 2, the Department of Social Development works closely with the Departments of Health and Education for the monitoring of the children to ensure that the children are provided with appropriate services while at home, whether through a clinic or an outreach service. In addition, the Western Cape Education Department monitors support to learners in special care centres. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. There's no follow-up there. Let me move on to the next. Is there follow-up? Honourable Makaleni.
Deputy Speaker, I would like to know how often is this monitoring done by the department?
I haven't got an answer to that question that I can be confident of saying in this House, so I wonder when the Honourable Makaleni would pose a question to the relevant Minister, who's Minister Fritz of Social Development.
Honourable Gopi.
Deputy Speaker, like the Premier is just saying that the questions must be posed to Minister Fritz. I've done that in a standing committee twice and with Militant, and there is people that can attest to that in our committee. I've done that twice, and they have been done nothing. There is kids in Milton that is mixed. They are sitting in a hall
Order.
and they are not cared for by
Remember, that
the
is a
department.
statement. Just turn it down to a question if you want to ask a question. That is a statement.
Did the Premier, was the Premier informed about the case that I had twice to the Minister?
I would very much like the Honourable Gopi to submit the information to me or submit a question, a written question to this House, and we can look into it.
Thank you. We will then move on to the next question, which is also a question standing over from the 15th of June. Honourable Botha to the Premier. I again see the Premier.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Speaker. I'm informed that the Centre for E-Innovation in the Western Cape Government is in a position to safeguard itself against cyber attacks. The Centre for I'll just call it the CEI, so that stands for the Centre for E-Innovation, has an information technology security component which has been established under the leadership of the Chief Information Security Officer. The unit is responsible for ensuring that the Western Cape Government puts the necessary processes and technologies in place in order to safeguard its information and ICT infrastructure assets. CEI works in partnership with the State Information Technology Agency, which is SETA, as well as external service providers to ensure that cybersecurity is adequately addressed. Number two, during my tenure as Premier, there have been numerous cyber attacks, albeit that they have been general in nature and have not specifically targeted the Western Cape Government. There has so far been limited negative impact on the services that we provide, but we remain vigilant and continue to improve our security position. The most recent cyber attack occurred from the 12th of May and relates to the WannaCry ransomware attack. Through numerous proactive and reactive measures, the Western Cape Government was able to isolate potentially vulnerable areas of the Western Cape Government ICT landscape, which were most at risk, and was able to put in place and action the required remediating steps. The Western Cape Government was therefore not impacted by the WannaCry ransomware attack, which is apparently a crypto worm which ends up trying to extort money out of people.
There's a quick follow-up, Honourable Botha.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I want to ask the Premier, what communication measures her department is using to communicate to staff about the threats and potential threats?
What I have seen so far is the notices around the lift wells, which I have read, but I understand that the Centre for E-Innovation is very quick to identify where the particular threat is happening or is likely to happen, and they identify and inform the relevant people without trying to create panic across the system. So I think the general information is out there, and as far as I understand it, the Centre for E-Innovation is very quick to target any places specifically at risk.
Thank you, Honourable Botha. Another follow-up.
Premier, is there an integrated approach that the department has in assisting municipalities?
I'm afraid I can't answer that question with any accuracy, but I do know that our disaster risk management system has looked at the risk of cyber attacks very seriously. And if that question is put to me, I will be able to get the full information, but I don't have the full information with me now.
Thank you. We then proceed to the next question. New questions to the Premier. Again, Honourable Ace to the Premier. Premier, question 1.
The answer is it has no impact on my work as Premier.
Honourable Ace, you want to follow up?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Premier, for responding. Premier, as the person which occupy the most senior government position in the DA, but cannot serve in any decision-making structure within that DA, does this ever happen to anybody in South Africa or in the world? And if it didn't happen, there must be an influence on you as the Premier.
Order. Order, Premier, you're allowed. You may answer the question, but I want to say, order. The question must relate to the Premier's executive role. I'm not sure whether that relates to it, but the Premier can answer if she wants to.
The answer to the question is I have no idea, and I would like to, in fact, refer you to Rule 1951.
Thank you. Honourable Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I would like to ask the Premier if she would offer to advise the Leader of the Opposition, Honourable Magaka, on how to manage factional disputes in the Western Cape ANC in a mature and responsible manner, and if so, what advice would the Premier give the Honourable Magaka?
Order, Premier, if you want to respond.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, I do think the Honourable Opposition is beyond help in any shape or form. Thank you.
Honourable Uys.
Maybe to get a bit closer and hopefully the Premier will try to answer this. Premier, the leader of the DA said it's quite evident that Helen Zille and I hold fundamentally different attitudes about the mission the DA needs to accomplish in 2019 and the goals and priorities that flow from this. Now, Honourable Deputy Speaker, it's very clear the leader is the give direction to the DA. What's your mission and goals, Honourable Premier?
My mission and goal is to help support good governance through the DA throughout South Africa and watch that with some satisfaction when I'm retired.
Thank you. The Honourable Magaka, the last opportunity.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, the Deputy Speaker. I just want to ask to the Premier, how is she going to execute her responsibility as a person who has been appointed by the DA and form part of the proportional representation of the DA in this legislature, in the event that now she can't be able to sit in any of the DA constitutional structures? How is she going to get the information so that it can execute DA's policies in this provincial government?
Premier.
Honourable Speaker, I need to remind the Leader of the Opposition that our party operates very differently from the way his party operates. I was nominated by the DA, I was elected by the electorate of the Western Cape into this position and elected by this Parliament into this position. So the bottom line is that that is how the DA understands the constitutional situation of a Premier. We are not deployed into positions, we are nominated and elected. Secondly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have a very good system of report backs. So, for example, without speaking out of caucus this morning, we had a full and comprehensive report back from all the decision bodies in the Democratic Alliance.
Thank you. We move to the next question. Honourable Magaka, the 4 questions have been exhausted. Second question, Honourable Uys to the Premier. Again, the Premier. Question 2.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Good. Thank you very much. The answer is yes. I did with the assistance of the Western Cape government officials, and I published the findings in a column that was published online, which I can read into the record if you would like me to. Shall I read into the record? All right, good. I'll do that. In the parasitic relationship between social and conventional media, fake news is often used to generate outrage, and fake outrage in turn to generate news. Things that should generate outrage often pass unnoticed. Outrage manufacturing becomes particularly marked in the months before political parties hold elective conferences for new leadership. During this period, internal jockeying for positions includes candidates raking as much muck on their opponents as possible. Healthy skepticism is, therefore, a useful attitude with which to approach the many revelations that make their way into the media as South Africa's major political parties approach their Congress season. It is fascinating to watch the links between some politicians and those journalists who are prepared to provide a public platform for their schemes. A few journalists even become proactive agents in a party's internal battles and vendettas. It was in this frame of mind that I read an article in last week's Sunday Times headlined, contractors paid for DAMEC's bash. The opening paragraph read, Acting DA Provincial Leader Bonginkosi Madikizela is facing allegations of impropriety after a swanky birthday bash in his honor was apparently partially funded by construction companies that benefit from projects financed by his department. Despite the inclusion of a denial from Mr. Madikizela himself, who is the Provincial Minister of Human Settlements, the overwhelming impression left by the headline and the article is that contractors funded a party for the political head of a department that awards contracts and tenders worth billions annually. If that were true, it would, at the very least, be improper. At worst, it might indicate corruption. So confident was the journalist of the latter that he publicly predicted the unfolding scandal would end Madikizela's career. Before long, the lines were buzzing. Journalists wanted comment. The party hierarchy advised me to take urgent and immediate action. The next day, the story escalated, with a breathless front-page headline in the Cape Times screaming, Madikizela's birthday party sleaze, followed by an article dripping in insinuations. Experience, life's best teacher, cautioned me to proceed carefully, gather as many facts as possible, and speak to the individuals involved before determining a course of action or making a public statement. I knew at least two things. One, Bonginkosi's candidature for the provincial leadership at September's Western Cape Congress meant that his opponents would be looking for every reason to publicly discredit him. And two, whatever may have happened in relation to his birthday celebration, the provincial procurement system would not have been influenced by it because we have built a firewall between politicians and the supply chain management system. So if it turned out that there were contractors who thought they could buy favors by sponsoring an event, they would end up sorely disappointed. Nevertheless, if there had been such an attempt, it would have been wrong and action would be required. It was obviously important to establish the facts. My first discussion was with Bonginkosi himself. I told him I was going to investigate the issue in as much detail as possible so that I could determine an appropriate course of action. He welcomed my approach. He told me the party had been organized as a surprise for him. He thought he was going out to a birthday dinner with a group of friends, only to walk into a room full of guests shouting, surprise. What he knew, well, he goes to everywhere wearing a smart suit. He goes to everywhere wearing a smart suit.
Why did he never come here in that suit?
Because he was going to a birthday dinner.
Order.
What he knew about the background was as follows. He's the best dressed man in South Africa by a long shot. Mr. Magaka's only second. What he knew about the background was as follows. He has for years been part of a 20-strong network of friends who support each other, specifically in times of celebration and bereavement, helping to raise money for events ranging from parties to funerals. This group, loosely based on the traditional Stokvel saving model, meets on a regular basis. When Bonginkosi was elected the DA's interim Western Cape leader, they wanted to throw a celebration party for him. Bonginkosi vetoed the idea. He said it was not appropriate in the circumstances and could potentially be interpreted as lording it over other candidates. They accepted his reservations and later hatched a plan to give him a surprise birthday party instead. It was a closely guarded secret. After the event, when he inquired who had paid for it, they told him that a fundraising subcommittee had called on people to make donations. He accepted their word and thought nothing further of it. This was normal in his friendship circle, he told me. He confirmed the newspaper's claim that Ms. Pumla Zansi, a partner in a construction firm doing business with the province, had contributed a multi-layered, multicolored cake worth 3,000 rand. That was the only contractor involved as far as he was aware. Bonginkosi told me that he and Pumla were part of a mutually supporting friendship circle. They had been friends for 20 years, from the time they were both activists in Khayelitsha, and long before he had even thought of joining the DA. For her part, Pumla had been a contractor to the province long before Bonginkosi became Provincial Minister of Human Settlements. She had never used her presence in their Stokvel network to seek a business advantage or political favour. In any event, said Bonginkosi, do you think that I can be bought for a birthday cake? I thought about our conversation. A long-standing friend buys you an admittedly expensive cake from her own pocket, and it turns into a scandal because her company does work for the province and has done for years prior to your arrival on the scene. This put a completely different spin on a story that had been touted as a career-ending scandal. But of course, there could conceivably be more to the story than that, so I investigated further. A party at the one and only hotel does not come cheap. I started by making contact with Pumla Zansi. She immediately agreed to meet and was entirely forthcoming. She explained that the group of friends had met over many weeks to organize the party. They had nominated a fundraising committee who had approached prospective donors. She gave me the full donor list, ranging from people who had contributed to the incidentals, such as tea and coffee at their planning meetings, to those who had paid for a big-ticket item, such as the hotel's bar tab. I then submitted the donors' names and the companies with which they were associated to the Chief Financial Officer of the Department of Human Settlements to determine if any of them are contractors to the department or the province. None, he responded. I managed to get the telephone number of the major donor, a Mr. G, who is based in Durban, where Bonginkosi's sisters live and where he once lived himself. He still has a large friendship network there. Mr. G confirmed that he had covered the lion's share of the cost and that he has no business interest in the Western Cape and none in construction, and that he had elicited further donations from his network in Durban. None did work for the Western Cape either, he assured me. Next, I had to check whether the people who said they were donors were the ones that actually paid for the party. So I contacted the relevant hotel manager and asked to see copies of the invoices and receipts. He was unable to give them to me due to client confidentiality, so I asked the party organizers to source the documents for me. They promptly did, and my office undertook a reconciliation which showed the accuracy of the information we had been given. Next, I scoured some of the photographs from the party, and with the help of the Department of Human Settlements, identified two contractors who attended as guests, Mr. P and Mr. M. Neither had been on the donor list, but I called them nevertheless to find out whether they had been asked to contribute and whether they had done so. I wasn't asked for a cent and I didn't pay a cent, replied Mr. M. He had been invited to the party because he had known Bonginkosi through political circles from the time he was still a member of the ANC. Mr. P told a similar story. He was a subcontractor to Mr. M, who had phoned him during the festivities to encourage him to pop into the party, and Mr. P then did. By then, I had followed all the leads open to me, and I'm confident that on the information available, there is no more to the story than that. Meanwhile, the impression has been indelibly created in the minds of the newspaper-reading public that the minister has been involved in shady dealings involving contractors to his department paying for a lavish birthday party. The ineluctable deduction is that he is corrupt. The ANC has reported the allegations to the public protector, who has powers to probe the matter even more deeply than I did. I will pass on everything I have to assist her if she asks me. And if anything further emerges, I will study it very carefully. The one question I have not answered to my satisfaction is where from inside the DA this allegation came from in the first place. The newspaper has kept its sources anonymous. I've said it before and I say so again. When it is established that informants have leaked fake news to the media, they and their motives should become the focus of the story because they have not acted in the public interest, only in their own. It is time that this becomes standard practice in the media. Too much damage is done by anonymous sources spreading fake news, aided and abetted by journalists who know, if they are honest, that their revelations have nothing to do with speaking truth to power.
Thank you. Order. Honourable Uys, your follow-up.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Premier. Premier, you started off and you ended off with internal leaks and internal fake news. And it seems like you want to almost like give that the reason for this information coming out. Now, could you determine where's this fake news coming from?
I've already answered that question if you were listening. I said, no, that's the next thing I would like to investigate.
Honourable Uys, your second chance.
The MEC, Honourable Premier, said that the person who organised this party for him was MEC Mbombo. Did you actually call her in as part of the investigation?
Yes, I did speak to Minister Mbombo. She was only asked to do one task, which was to invite certain people to the party.
Honourable Uys.
Honourable, thank you, Deputy Speaker. Honourable Premier, is it morally and legally correct to have a spouse, two spouses serving on your executive and your cabinet? We could see there could be a conflict of interest, especially with the arrangement that we see now.
They are not spouses, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Deputy Speaker, they are spouses in terms of your own handbook for ministers, your own one. Please check it.
I'll give another last opportunity. Is there an opportunity? Is there a question there? I'll give it to the Honourable Wenger.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In light of the Deputy Police Minister allowing his Chief of Staff to use taxpayers' money to hold an ANC press conference, has she perhaps heard of Honourable Ace condemning this blatant corruption by the ANC before looking for corruption elsewhere?
Order, Premier, just 1 second. Honourable Tacha.
To you, Deputy Speaker, are we allowed to entertain in this House fake news? Because we know and she knows that's not true.
Order, Honourable Chacha.
So I'm saying, why must we entertain it
Order.
here?
I will address that.
Must we allow it here?
Order. Order. It's not for the chair to determine whether something is fake news or genuine news. The question was asked, and if the Premier wants to respond, the Premier is free to respond.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, one cannot open a newspaper in South Africa without reading of a criminal state under the control of the ANC. The dossier that has been put forward by OUTA, for example, on President Zuma is so compelling and so damning, and I haven't heard a word from the Honourable the Opposition. The issue that the Honourable Wenger raises is a very important one, with the Police Minister using the cover of his office to pay for an ANC event at a swanky hotel. But in the ANC's League of Corruption, that is small beer. It is quite unbelievable when one reads the dossier of how the minister, who is now the Minister of Finance, allowed the capture of state enterprises when he was the minister in that department, and allowed people to get certain favours for citizenship when he was the minister of another department.
Premier, just 1 second.
I have never heard from the Honourable the Opposition one word of condemnation.
Order, Honourable
of this.
Chacha.
Or the irrelevance of this thing now. Where are we going with this?
Order.
No. No, we must not try luck here.
Order. Before we all
Please.
jump on points. Order. The question was asked by the member at the back there, and the Premier is responding to that. So I can't interfere with that answer. The Premier is free to answer the way she wants to. Honourable Wale.
I would ask that you rule on these fake points of order.
Honourable Premier, you may continue.
Oh, it's not finished.
I'm not finished. So given the fact that the ANC has turned a corrupt state into an actual criminal state, captured by international syndicates, it is quite extraordinary that they come here and try and make a scandal out of a birthday cake.
We move on to the next question. We've exhausted the 4 opportunities on that one. Honourable.
Can I really, Deputy Speaker?
Is there a point of order?
No, I just want to, just on number 43, when we get irrelevance, Speaker, it's upon you as our Speaker to raise that to a member. You can't allow things, one to go throughout the world and speak something that is not relevant to what we're dealing with.
No, we all agree with that, Honourable
Rule 43 is very clear, and it gives you the power to tell the Speaker where to get off.
Yes, I agree totally and I accept that. But also when a question is asked, which becomes, then the answer to that question becomes relevant. You may.
Is the question not supposed to be relevant on the question that was asked initially?
Yes.
It's not supposed to be a follow-up on that question.
Yes, relevant to the original question. Or
Because I was stopped
order.
a couple of times to sit down on the basis that the question I'm asking has nothing to do with the question that was initially asked.
Yeah. Relevance relates to the original question and to the response given. So if the response goes into a certain direction, Honourable Chacham, I'm talking. If the response goes in a certain direction, then it becomes relevant for a follow-up to be asked on that response. That is what happened here. But you're free to raise a point of order when you feel that relevance is at stake here, and I accept that. Honourable Leader?
Then, Deputy Speaker, what was the relationship between the initial question that was asked by Honourable PAs with the question that was asked there by the member of the DA?
The Premier, do you want
which was answered by
the
that.
Premier responded in a certain way, and that
Sorry,
led to the following
can
question.
She speak while, can she
Order?
stand while you are still...
No.
Yeah.
Please take your seat then. Thank you. Premier, do you want to address me on this one?
Yes, I do. I do want to address you on that because the Honourable Ace asked me about an allegation relating to a birthday cake and tried to present it as corruption. So it's entirely relevant to ask the question as to whether he's ever condemned any other form of corruption on his side of the House.
That's exactly what happened. We move on to the next question, question 9. Honourable Kividu to Mr. Plater. Minister Plater.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, thank you. Two parts of the question. Part 1. An amnesty period was announced by the former Minister of Police but was never implemented. Because there was no firearm amnesty period, no firearms could be handed in. I am, however, still hopeful that such an amnesty period will indeed be implemented, and I will raise this issue at my next MINMEC meeting with the new Minister of Police. Part 2 of the question. Operation Combat and the SAP Stability Unit focus on confiscation of guns and drugs and focus on the issue of gangs. These units, with the help of crime intelligence, are regarded as special task forces. The President announced the creation of specialized units to focus primarily on guns and drugs. To date, however, there is no indication regarding the implementation of these.
Honourable Kividu.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I thank the Honourable Minister for answering the question, but as I detected, he combined the two. So I have follow-up questions on both, and may I then continue?
You may ask your question, yes? One question
Honourable
at a time.
Minister, can any success be ascribed to this so-called amnesty period and process?
I don't know what you mean by a so-called amnesty period. I am of the opinion that the police leadership still looking at the creation of an amnesty period. Actually, they did the announcement. I think it must just be implemented, and I don't know what went wrong there. That is a question one will need to ask the National Minister. But there's successes, drug successes, gun successes in the province. Looking at what happened the last week, drugs to the tune of 498 million rand confiscated. It's a major success, and reports have it that it was the biggest amount of drugs confiscated in South Africa. And also over the weekend, drugs to the tune of 2 million rand also confiscated. And the issue is that crime intelligence with these units mentioned was involved in the confiscation of those drugs. So that is success. Despite an amnesty period, the normal police investigative work will continue, and it is continuing.
Honourable Kividu, your second opportunity.
Deputy Speaker, the reason for why I called it a so-called will hinge on my second question. Honourable Minister, were there any concerted and vigorous attempts by law enforcement officers to confiscate outstanding illegal firearms?
The amount of guns confiscated by SAPS on a week-to-week basis is in the region of 35. So it is happening, and we are pleased with the amount of guns confiscated, but I need to caution by stating it's a tall order, because every week that amount confiscated, every week that amount of guns is available, and that is a big worry for us.
Honourable Kividu.
Final question on this, question 1. Honourable Minister, are these the firearms stolen by ex-Colonel Nicholas Prinsloo, who is currently on holiday in Portsmouth, to be sold to gangsters on the Cape Flats?
Part of it, Honourable Deputy Speaker, you must realise that there was break-ins at the Simonstown Naval Base as well. There was also break-ins at the base here, the former Esakaka base near Khayelitsha, next to Spine Road. And there was also break-ins at some police stations where guns was stolen. So one mustn't be fooled by that all the guns that is doing the rounds on the Cape Flats is only linked to Prinsloo. Many of the guns is linked to these institutions I have mentioned as well.
Honourable Member, your last opportunity.
Baie dankie. Wat die tweede vraag betref, het ek ook...
Watter tweede vraag praat u nou van?
Daar was twee vrae.
Ja, jy kan maar aangaan, jy kan maar
Daar
voortgaan.
was twee vrae, definitief vraag 1 en 2.
Goed
Daar was
so.
met 3 vrae op vraag 1 en dan vraag 2. Agbare minister, in die geval van gewapende roof, as ook die afvuur van wapens, en ook in die geval van moord met wapens, waarom word die perpetreerders van hierdie misdaad gewoonlik gearresteer, maar die vuurwapens word weinig gekonfiskeer?
Agbare minister.
Dit is 'n probleem, die feit dat die hot bodies gearresteer word, maar baie keer is die wapen nie te vind nie. Maar dit is waarom ons 'n intelligensie-eenheid het en speurders het om dit na te speur. Baie keer is daar suksesse, baie keer is daar nie suksesse met die ondersoeke nie.
Dankie, ons gaan voort. Volgende vraag. Agbare lid, ongelukkig die 4 geleenthede is klaar uitgeput. Die 2 vrae word saam hanteer as 1 vraag, dan kry jy net 4 kansse. We move on to question number 3, the Honourable Beerwinkel to Dr. Meyer. Minister of Finance. Minister of Finance, the question is to you. Question 3.
Sorry, Deputy Speaker, it's Minister Grant, as usual. Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. On the question to the Honourable Member Beerwinkel, an opportunity was provided to all 30 municipalities within the province to participate in the Financial Management Capacity Grant. Swellendam municipality indicated that it would not participate for the 2016-17 year, albeit attempts made by the Provincial Treasury to persuade the municipality to reconsider their position given all the related benefits of the municipal financial capacity grant. The reason provided by the municipality for not participating was that given their current financial reality, they did not have the financial resources to cover the shortfall or shared portion as expressed in the Memorandum of Agreement. Provincial Treasury in response highlighted the following, that the Financial Management Capacity Grant commitments have now been extended to the 2019-20 financial year, and it was also proclaimed in the Provincial Government Gazette. The grant framework is not prescribed on the form and the quantum of co-funding. However, this should not be inconsequential as it aims to further entrench the support initiative. The 2017-18 grant framework was amended to take into account rural areas, in that the limit has been reduced from 3 to 2 students per year to accommodate the additional cost requirements. So the question also asked, what have we done subsequent? I have subsequent, Honourable Deputy Speaker, written to the Mayor of Swellendam, requesting further engagements towards securing the participation of the municipality in this support initiative. And my department will engage also with the Overberg, the district municipality, to also initiate some discussions in the region, and also with the Swellendam municipality with the implementation of this initiative. Honourable Deputy Speaker, given the fact that many of these rural municipalities don't have the capacity to attract young people in this particular field, this particular financial capacity grant is specifically targeting the youth in those particular municipalities, and also to facilitate the retention of those particular financial capacity building skills within the municipality. So this is a golden opportunity for the areas but obviously one cannot force a municipality to take part in this. Obviously, it has to be a voluntary agreement.
Agbare Beerwinkel.
Thank you, MEC. Speaker, most of what the MEC has now explained is what we knew and is what the department explained to us. I basically wanted to know, because the municipality's biggest problem was they didn't have a counter funding that's needed for embarking on this initiative to but to empower these youth. So my basic question now is, what measures are put in place to assist the municipality with their financial constraints to be able to take on youth, although I now hear the MEC saying that they've reduced it from 3 to 2. And yes, we know that the rural opportunities are few, but it's because that these rural youth need these opportunities. We want the department to do everything in their power to assist Swellendam to be able to do this. Are they assisting in a financial capacity?
Thank you, Minister.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, the financial capacity grant is a grant to assist these youth building skills within the municipality so that that skill can assist the municipality from maintaining the clean financial audits within the budget and treasury offices. We have now gone extra to say we will also now look broader than just the Swellendam municipality, to look within the context of the Overberg municipality. Absolutely, it cannot be our responsibility to go beyond that, because then we will have to do that for all 30 municipalities. This is certainly not the objective of this particular grant. And as the Honourable Member knows, one of the things that we have done is, in the beginning of the year, introduced a revenue masterclass to assist the municipalities to increase their own revenue, for example, through tariff structuring, because that's one of the tools and instruments that you can increase your local revenue. But the responsibility and the mandate and the separation of powers, that is certainly within the jurisdiction of Swellendam municipality. I don't think we can do any much more, but I am willing, as have already answered, makes the provision to transfer this for more students for next year without necessarily any co-funding associated with this. And I think that is a fair arrangement between the Western Cape Provincial Treasury and the municipality. There are 28 municipalities that understand that type of fiscal arrangements, and they have agreed with such arrangements. But I gather from the Honourable Member, we must not just accept this, and we will still further continue to negotiate with the municipality to see what we can do, but without any further additional financial impacting on the budget of this particular program, because we have to cater for 30 municipalities. I have now written to the Mayor, and I will certainly report back to this House about the outcome of that conversation.
Honourable Beerwinkel, do you want to follow up further?
Yes, Chairperson. The MEC is now repeating what he first said about what the grant is about. I know what the grant is about. I know what the purpose of the grant is. Yeah. I'm saying Swellendam needs to be invested. Maybe I should change it and say Swellendam needs to be investigated.
Change it into a question?
Yeah. Why does the department not investigate why Swellendam cannot afford to add 3 students to this program? Because I know that they can. There's money that they waste on other things, Speaker. So that I'm sure that it's an honourable program for youth. Why are they not doing it? There has to be a reason why. 28 municipalities can do it. Why can't they?
Your question is clear to the Minister. He's ready.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I have written to the Mayor precisely to ask that particular question, and as soon as I get an answer from that municipality, I will come back to the House and give that answer to the municipality. That municipality has not yet written back to me, and given the fact that we respect the principle of the separation of powers, I have also subsequently asked my office, after writing to the Mayor, I've also asked him, my staff, to give the Mayor a phone call on this particular matter. But I'm happy to come back to this House in the spirit of accountability to report back to the House about the outcome of my questions and the telephonic conversations with the Mayor.
Honourable Ace.
Speaker, can we just get to the numbers, Deputy Speaker? What was the amount that was expected from Swellendam Municipality? Because as you drive through Swellendam Municipality, you see the best town in South Africa. And just to understand, what did you ask them to co-contribute towards these 3 youth students per annum?
Honourable Deputy Speaker, as I've indicated in my answer, there's no co-creation in terms of the funding for the 17-18 financial year. The target was for 3 people, reduced now to 2, for 120,000. We will now, in the new financial year, going forward, make provision for 240,000 without co-funding, and in 18-19, 360,000 without co-funding. There is, however, an obligation for municipalities who have a shortage of these financial management capacity skills, once these persons have completed their studies, that they be taken up in the Budget Treasury Office, as the National Treasury has now requested all the MECs to make sure that we assist with the Budget and Treasury Offices of the various municipalities. And part of that assistance is that the graduates of this particular program be taken up in the staff establishment of the municipality, so that we have properly staffed Budget and Treasury Offices within the municipality, so that we can maintain our status of clean audits within municipalities. So there's no co-funding. There is an obligation to have some taking these people up in the staff establishment.
Thank you. We move on to is there further follow-up? No, we move on to the next question, question 4. Honourable Joseph, again to Minister Meyer.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. According to the recent media reports, Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba officially told Parliament that no nuclear deal has been signed. He further indicated that the Minister of Finance does not have the authority to conclude country agreements for the nuclear build program on behalf of the government. Neither does the Minister have the mandate to determine policy or implementation frameworks for the energy sector. Well, Honourable Deputy Speaker, in terms of Section 66 and Section 70 of the Public Finance Management Act, it outlines that the Minister of Finance's role in this regard, which requires concurrence for any guarantee, indemnity or security that binds the National Revenue Fund to further financial commitments. I sign many of these on a regular basis. The Finance Minister, in addition, said that if any agreements have been concluded regarding project management and the construction of specified nuclear power plants, it would have been between the relevant accounting authority and the service provider. Honourable Deputy Speaker, the nuclear procurement program was reset in May 2017 after a High Court ruled that the process had been illegal. Energy Minister Kubai thereafter announced that she was restarting the process by signing new agreements with the United States, with China, South Korea, Russia, and France in 2017 June, and that the procurement program will only begin officially when Eskom releases its request for proposals. Any increased burden of national debt service cost caused by the proposed nuclear deal, at least estimated at a cost of 1 trillion rand, will have a negative impact on the transfers from the national government to provinces, including the Western Cape. Honourable Deputy Speaker, we also know that the current debt service cost is the highest single expenditure item on the budget, and has also now increased from last year from 147 billion rand to this year to 162 billion rand. And so, Honourable Deputy Speaker, we also know that in terms of Eskom, is having the highest state guarantees that they've already taken up of a 477 billion rand state guarantees. Eskom, who has the responsibility to manage this, has already taken up the biggest chunk of that 477 billion rand state guarantee, namely 350 billion rand state guarantees. So in short, Honourable Deputy Speaker, this nuclear deal, minimum cost of 1 trillion rand, but I'm also happy to inform the Honourable Member Joseph, from starting nuclear contract to actually switching on the lights of nuclear will take 17 years. I'm glad that the ANC will no longer be in power, so we can cancel that in the union buildings.
Honourable Joseph.
Deputy Speaker, thank you, and thank you to the Minister for the response. I just would like to ask the Minister, the Minister of Finance, since he's taken new office, has the Minister ever made an attempt, and how are they going to, they want to pursue this course after the court case? Have the Minister ever taken the opportunity at MINMEC to explain how, if the ruling party wants to start, how they're going to fund this trillions, where the money is going to come from?
Thank you, Honourable Joseph. Honourable Deputy Speaker, this is soon I will have to undergo my performance evaluation with the Premier. One of the targets is meeting with your national minister. I will have to fail in my assessment in this particular regard because Minister Malusi Gigaba has not yet called a budget council since he has been appointed. Now, because he's meeting the Guptas. And honourable members, the budget council is like the Education Council and the Health Council. It's a statutory council. So it is important that as the MEC of Finance in this province, that I regularly meet with him on this particular regard. But because of his non-commitment to meet with the MECs of Finance, I must now suffer in my performance agreement, Honourable Member Squatcha. So it is really sad that I am not able to meet with the National Minister, but what I have done, Honourable Deputy Speaker, I have submitted budget items because he's not meeting with us. One of the items is the nuclear, because, Honourable Member Joseph, there is a dynamic at play in the National Treasury. We have seen that Minister Gigaba was asked to sign the nuclear deal, but Minister Nene, he wasn't prepared to sign this nuclear deal, and Mr. Des van Rooyen, who was only available for a weekend, he didn't get the chance in the National Treasury to sign this nuclear deal, and within days of taking power, Minister Pravin Gordhan, he said, and he's on record, we will only spend money we have, meaning he will not sign the nuclear deal. But we have also seen that President Zuma's determination has never wavered, and neither has Mr. Gordhan's. Mr. Gordhan said insufficient work was done by the Department of Energy nationally, and so we now know why Minister Pravin Gordhan was later removed from his position. But Honourable Member Joseph, in November 2016, during a debate in Parliament on a vote of no confidence in Mr. Zuma, Gigaba said South Africa was being subjected to a regime change offensive, in part because of its plan to build a nuclear power station. That was the response of Minister Gigaba. Opposing this agenda was necessary, he said. In other words, he was in support of these plans for the, and he said, for the nuclear, and he said, he used these words, to the very death. In other words, he was prepared to die for the Guptas, but this nuclear deal must proceed. I think this was one of the real reasons for Mr. Gordhan's replacement and not the security considerations as pointed out. Honourable Member Joseph, why this matter is so important for me, because 1 trillion rand, that is almost what we totally collect in a year. The total revenue from the tax, different sources of tax dispensation. And here, this government is committed. And the world and South Africa is moving in the direction of renewable energy, and there's great, as the Premier has reported earlier in the State of the Province address, significant progress being made in terms of the cost and the research in the direction of renewable energy. So I think what we are now seeing is that the evidence is becoming more clear. In 2010, Mr. Gupta bought a uranium mine. 3 years later, in 2013, Mr. Gupta went to Mr. Zuma and he said, my mine is not making money. So Minister Gordon asked us to dot the lines, join the dots. Join the dots. The dots is in 2010, Mr. Gupta bought a mine. In 2013, he said, my mine is not making money. And Mr. Zuma said, don't worry, I'll take care of you. So what we're now seeing here is that Mr. Nene wasn't prepared to sign this thing. Minister Gordon was not prepared to sign. And we know now from the Gupta leaks that Minister Gigaba, who has given the Gupta family, through the Department of Home Affairs, citizenship illegally. And so, I think, Honourable Member Joseph, your question is very relevant. But the text of your question tells us that we have a Minister of Finance here in South Africa whose integrity is in shatters. And so I understand if you don't want to call meetings with the MECs of Finance, because we're going to confront him with these realities as it is at the moment.
Thank you. We move on to the next question. Question 6, Minister Mbombo.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In terms of the powers vested upon me, as according to the Chapter 13 of the Constitution, and also the Public Finance Management Act, Chapter 5 and Chapter 7, I won't be able to know who are the consultants and the contractors in my department, because that function is rested within the accounting office of the HOD. However, because the question was posed, and then I have to go back from last year to find out in terms of if there were any Western Cape government consultants and contractors, if they were part of that. And then the answer is no. And then the B, no taxpayers' money, no contractors that paid the birthday party. So that's the answer.
Order. Is there a follow-up? Honourable Gopi.
Deputy.
Order. Honourable Chacham, I can't hear your colleague next to you.
Deputy Speaker, would the MEC agree to refer the matter to the independent forensic investigation? Will the MEC agree to refer the matter to the independent forensic investigation?
I'm not aware of any matter that has ever been raised other than now in this question.
Thank you. We then move on to the next question. New questions. Order. Question 3 to Minister Plato.
Deputy Speaker, thank you. Two parts of the question. Yes, the incident was brought under my attention. And the second part, yes, disciplinary actions have been instituted and is currently underway.
Honourable Wenger.
I'd like to ask the Minister, who is undertaking or which entity is undertaking the disciplinary action?
Unfortunately, Deputy Speaker, that is an internal municipal matter. It's not for any provincial government entity to investigate. I had the discussion with the local mayor, Mayor Vosloo, and they do have their own disciplinary codes and stuff dealing with investigations with regard to these matters.
Thank you. Honourable Olivier.
Now, MEC, well, given that this is an internal municipal investigation, are you kept informed, or do you take a view that you would like to follow up on this issue, seeing that it is in the public domain and it is in the province?
I would believe it is more for the Minister of Local Government to be on top of that situation, but it doesn't matter. Fact of the matter is, if there is a sense in this House that I need to stay close to the investigation, I will do that.
We then move on to the next question. Question 4, again to Minister Plato.
Deputy Speaker, this question is a very, very important one, looking at what happened over the last couple of weeks and days in the Western Cape, specifically on the Cape Flats. And, Deputy Speaker, the abduction, the raping, the killing, and the dumping of children, specifically young girls and even babies in the province, is of major concern for the department, for the police, for the many NGOs and the general public. Courtney was just 3 years old. The Strand girl, just 5 years old. The Khayelitsha girl, also 5 years old. The Atlantis boy, only 1.5 years old. And the Kensington boy of 10 days ago, only 18 months old. And there's many more. Something is wrong with our men in society raping and killing our young girls. We have to talk about this. We can't address the problems without talking about it. Another big problem, Deputy Speaker, is that in 95% of all of these cases, the perpetrator and victim knew each other. A friend, a neighbor, a boyfriend, or even a family member. The problem for the police is, how do you police what is happening inside people's house? The Department of Community Safety partner with many institutions and organizations. Our own institutions, that is social development, NGOs, the police, religious fora, neighborhood watches and CPFs, in continued attempts to address this. Safety is everyone's responsibility, and we realize that if we want to be successful in our mission, then we all have to work together. The department, reaching our team and myself, constantly address communities to talk about these issues. Educating the public, empowering them with knowledge and correct information is key to address the problem holistically. That is why we strengthen our neighborhood watches and structure walking buses for them to be our ears and eyes in the communities to alert us on what is wrong. We need, however, community members to work with us. We need our mothers, and this is very important. We need our mothers to speak out. Many times a mother knows but keep quiet. Many times other family members knows but keep quiet. Within the context of our formalized programs, the department, in executing its oversight mandate in terms of the Constitution, monitors the implementation of the Domestic Violence Act at police stations, thereby ensuring that victims receive the required services and protection as determined by the Act. The department also monitors identified child murder and rape cases through its watching brief unit, so as to identify possible systematic investigative shortcomings and to report thereon. Various other programs is our Youth Safety and Religious Partnership, our Chrysalis Academy, our alcohol harms reduction and deployment of safety kiosks, to name a few, that are initiated during school holidays. Youth months, women's months, and 60 days of activism indirectly prevent the killing of children and women through awareness and empowerment. The one program that is focused on the safety of children is the Walking Bus Project. The initiative has members of the broader community, specifically parents, to walk groups of children to school and back home in the afternoon, and at the same time keeping an eye on the perimeters of the respective schools. The project involves the participation of schools, governing bodies, the municipalities, SAPs, Metro Police, Provincial Traffic Community Police Forums, neighborhood watches, and state departments. The visibility of walking bus members in the community can act as a deterrent for potential criminal activity and create a safe zone for school-going children and the community at large. And in conclusion, Deputy Speaker, we must begin to focus on the men in our society. It is the men that is raping the young girls. It is the older men in our communities, in our society, that have an appetite for young girls. And they don't care if the girl is a baby of 1.5 years old, or 5 years old, or if it is a granny of 80 years old. This issue, we cannot, and I want to repeat myself, we cannot sweep it under the carpet. That will be our focus during the upcoming Women's Month period, during August. We focus too much on the role of the woman, what she must wear, her dress, how she must conduct herself. There's not enough focus on the man. And we need a men's week or a men's month as well, so that we focus on women's issues, equally begin to focus on men's issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honourable Churcham.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. The murders and rapes of women and children, they continue unabated, though you're saying there are interventions that are in place by different stakeholders. I want to understand, MEC, what is your view in relation to the Commission of Inquiry, as our Premier refuses to implement it? Because I think that this commission would be able, as like the commission that was done for Khayelitsha, will be able to deal and assist us to resolve with some of the problems here. What is your view in implementing, or are you with the Premier in refusing?
Honourable Member, you're done with your question. Honourable Chief Whip.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Honourable Member is asking the Minister to express an opinion.
Yes, the Minister, the Honourable Member Churcham, that is correct, but I will leave it to the Minister to respond in the way he wants to respond. But technically, he can't ask the member what his opinion is about a matter.
Deputy Speaker, that is a question for the Premier, because the Premier and her office is dealing with this commission issue. I don't want to infringe on that level. But let me say, we have the police focusing on this issue. We have crime intelligence focusing on this issue. We have many NGOs paid millions of rands collectively by the Social Development Department. And still the problem is carrying on in our communities. So the current entities struggle to contain it, struggle to deal with it. We can add 3, 4 more, whatever issues and inquiries. The question is, will they as a collective be able to contain this problem? SAPS's message is clear. How do you deal with this issue if it is happening in the house? Courtney, the perpetrator, was renting a room in the house. The Khayelitsha problem, or the Khayelitsha problem was a friend of the family. In the Strand, it was the boyfriend of the grandmother. How does police that, and how will a commission of inquiry police that?
Honourable Olivier.
Deputy Speaker, given the interventions and the measures, and also the fact that many of this incident is committed by well-known and in the main male, will you agree that a dedicated will you agree that a dedicated office will assist in the investigation, which focuses mainly on dealing with those issues? And hence, I think the issue on the Children's Commission is an issue because you've got a Human Rights Commission. So those focuses really on assisting in strengthening what we are raising. So don't you think that that commissioner or that office will be an added or a plus to resolve most of the other issues, or an avenue for those accused or those affected to run to that
get to your
office for
question,
help?
please. Minister Plato.
Dedicated police units exist already, and dedicated specialized police units like the FCS unit, the Family Violence Child Protection Services unit, is focusing on this. And let me say they monitor all the cases at the various police stations. They also conduct talks, meetings with community entities, and they go out with my reaching out team to address various community fora on this issue. It is a debatable issue. If another dedicated entity will assist that, we can talk about that.
Continue.
Chair, no, it's the chair.
Continue.
MEC, I hear your response. Do you think that the police, having listened to in numerous occasions when we raise issues that they are understaffed, you need special units and so on, do you think that they are resourced enough to be able to deal with these issues if you are able to set up a dedicated? Or do you think that you are saying there's dedicated in that office? Do you think it's enough? And do you think, or don't you think that this would also assist in this issue of a children's commission?
A very important question. Chair, I will take it up with SAPS. I called a very high-level meeting with the prosecuting authority, with the court's management, and also with other important interested parties, including the police, correctional services as well. These entities did indicate, Chairperson, they confirmed they will be at that meeting my office have organized, and definitely I will pose that question to that important meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay. No more follow-up questions? We move on to question. Time expired. Okay, sorry. So we are at.
There are 2 minutes left still, according to my calculation. Which question are we now with? The next question would be question number 5. Honourable Madikizela.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. After the inception of the housing subsidy regime, the department serviced large tracts of land in Hines Park via the Integrated Service Land Project, or ISLP, in an attempt to empower emerging contractors. The department made small parcels of land available to emerging contractors to construct the units approved, the construction of units approved the housing subsidy beneficiaries. However, there are no records, because the question is asking about 9 million. There are no records that exist that 9 Million Foundation was involved in a subsidized housing project in Hines Park. Now, with the second part of the question with regard to the issuing of title deeds, Phase 1 was undertaken by the department and 100% complete. Phase 2 and 3 was undertaken by the City of Cape Town and is 85% complete in terms of title deeds issuing. The ones that have not been issued are problem cases where you find that beneficiaries are deceased and houses are occupied by illegal occupants, etc. Now, in an attempt to resolve these matters, the department is in the process of formulating guidelines that will assist municipalities to resolve them. In the second part of the question, in general practice, the developer, if it's brought to their attention, at the time of construction, they will construct the dwelling with the necessary disability-friendly furnishings, according to the relevant needs of the beneficiary prior to them taking occupation. But the policy also makes provision for dwellings to be adapted should the beneficiary or a member of his or her family become disabled subsequent to them having taken occupation. Now, in such cases, we expect then people to come forward and tell us so that we can be able to make necessary changes. In terms of the Mitchell's Plain, which is the third part of the question, there are currently 17,940 applicants residing in Mitchell's Plain on the housing demand database. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
There are no follow-up questions. Then we proceed. Then it brings us to the end of questions. The questions not dealt with will be printed in Hansard. We move on to on the order paper. The next is the questions to the Premier without notice. And I see the Honourable Christians first.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I just want to ask the Premier, secondly, this morning I heard that young children as young as 6-year-old are consuming drugs and alcohol. I want to know from the Premier, the Western Cape government's green paper on reducing alcohol harms basically is there to reduce the negative impact of alcohol on society. Is this bearing fruit?
Thank you very much. It's a very important question, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That is the one game changer that we are really battling with, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's incredibly difficult for governments to change public behaviour, as we all know from the history of our various attempts to do so in this country. And we've had to rethink the alcohol harms reduction strategy very, very carefully. It hinges upon managing availability, enforcing the rule of law, and creating alternative recreational activities for people other than consuming alcohol. But when it comes to 6- and 7-year-olds, again, there is no way a government can police what is happening in people's homes. Parents have a responsibility. And there's no way that a government can make sure that children are going to school in a proper condition at every point. Yes, we must pick it up in the school, and we do pick it up in the school. And there have been cases that have come to me which I've been completely shocked about, where children have to be put outside until they sober up before the start of school lessons. It is a very, very serious issue, the systemic abuse of alcohol, and the extent to which it is, in some homes, considered a normal thing even for children to do. So I'm afraid that this is one of the game changers that we've had to fundamentally rethink. We analysed some parts of that rethink at the Cabinet meeting this week, but it is a very serious problem.
Is there a follow-up? Honourable Christians.
Deputy Speaker, is the Premier aware that the Western government doing that, but that there's municipalities in the Western Cape that is busy extending trading hours and also typically on Sundays? So it seems to me there is a conflict between municipality and the province. Is the Premier doing anything to resolve this contradiction?
Trading hours are a constitutional power of municipalities. And our framework can obviously guide people, but we cannot infringe upon the powers of municipalities, as I understand it. It's a very tricky issue, Mr. Speaker, and hours of trade and availability are two major factors. Ironically, we cannot do that by banning access to alcohol. In fact, ironically, we have to have more legalized, compliant outlets rather than the illegal and non-compliant outlets where we can't enforce license conditions. So these are major challenges, and I would very much like the honourable member to give me details of municipalities that are moving in the opposite direction, and perhaps through the intergovernmental relations framework mechanisms we can work that out.
Honourable Christians.
Premier, the City of Cape Town's got 24 sub-councils, and I've just done just checked, and 10 to 20 applications is received for extending of trading hours per sub-council meeting, and there's 24 sub-councils, and that's not even outside the metropolitan. So it is a major problem, and the council, 90% of those trading hours, extended trading hours and Sunday trading hours is granted. I cannot see how that helps, and something needs to be done to do that. It even impacts on Monday going to work, because people cannot freely access alcohol on Sundays.
I take it that's a question. Yes, thank you.
I would like to thank the honourable member Christians for drawing that to my attention, and I will certainly follow it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. We move on to the next one. Honourable Chacha.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Mr. Gary Fisher. Used to be the HOD. He was involved with the public works, dealing with properties, whatever it may. From there, he has an interest also as a property developer, because we know that he was also a board member for the Capital Group private company, which was also involved with the Tafelberg involvement in terms of the school and other properties around. My question, I know you are all interested. What is this question? My question is, looking at the revolving door that we have seen, a person moving from public works then goes and advising the department of the Premier.
Honourable, just one second, Honourable Chacha. Honourable Chief Whip.
Deputy Speaker, with respect, we are really tolerant with regard to this. The rules are quite clear. A sentence or two to lead up and then ask the question is fine. But these go into half a page of motivation and meanderings and all that sort of stuff. Can we be a little bit more disciplined in this regard, please?
Yes, I will, certainly. Honourable Chacham, you were on the point of now to get to your question, so the introduction was a little bit too long.
I was going there just... The question, Chair, that one would want to understand, has the department or our provincial government conducted an investigation into Gary's future conflict of interest in relation to allegations of him being involved in how the decision of selling the property of Tafelberg.
Is that a question?
It's a question.
I'm not sure whether you phrased it as a question. It sounds like a statement to me.
No, it's a question. Has the department conducted an investigation?
Okay, that's clear.
It's very clear.
Thank you, Premier, if you want to respond to that.
Sorry, after all of that, I still didn't quite get the question. Which department instituted an investigation into what?
Sachin, will you want to give some clarity there? Very briefly.
No, Chair, we are asking the department of the Premier, we are asking him, her, as a Premier. So we would expect whatever the questions are, we are asking her, she must respond of her responsibility. What did she do?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I take it that was the first follow-up question, because I answered the first question with a question. What I did do was, when Mr. Gary Fisher came to work for me, I sought legal advice in terms of his job description and the parameters of the work he was doing, and I'm satisfied that it was in order.
Honourable Chacham, your follow-up question, if you want to ask a follow-up.
Yes. In light that Mr. Fisher, who is your advisor, continued to be involved in other property development programs, what did you do to actually make sure that you are curtailing him of not getting involved in those, particularly the Tafelberg? What did you do?
Thank you. I think that is...
Because his company is involved there.
Thank you, Honourable Chacham.
Okay,
Premier?
I think the Honourable Chacham is a little confused. Firstly, Mr. Fisher is not my advisor. Secondly, when he was my advisor, his role was ring-fenced only to the Conradi Better Living model.
Thank you. Can we move on to the next one? Honourable, I'll allow you the opportunity to ask a second and a half question. The first one was
No, Chair,
slightly confusing.
we know that he was involved only in the other project. But, Chair, Deputy Speaker, there is no way that a person who is involved in properties
Honourable
or in
Chacham,
the
get to
departments
your question. I've allowed you an opportunity to ask another question.
No,
Order. Come to the
Order,
question, please.
No, the question is, what has the Premier done to make sure that his property company is not involved with the Tafelberg site?
Thank you.
Because he had all the information in any case.
Premier, if you want to respond to that.
The answer is that I ring-fenced his role only to the Conradi Hospital, or that site in any event, and the Better Living model. And my information also is that he has no interest directly in the Tafelberg site at all. So I'm not quite sure what the Honourable Chacham is getting at.
Thank you, Premier. Honourable Wenger.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. About a month ago, the Premier announced the diversion of R3 million from a Western Cape government project towards the stabilisation units for gang-affected Lavender Hill. What are the respective details of this funding and what are the expected outcomes?
Thank you very much, Deputy Chair. We were facing a very serious crisis in Lavender Hill. The schools had closed, or some of the schools had closed, and some teachers had been hospitalized for stress, and there was continuous gang shooting in the streets outside, and children were being put at very serious risk. In fact, one of the few places they were safe in Lavender Hill was on the school premises, but coming to school and leaving school was very serious risk for them, and of course teachers feel personally responsible for the children while they're at school. So it creates a very, very tense situation for teachers who battle to teach under those circumstances, understandably. So it constituted a crisis for us. We also know that last year we gave R2.5 to R3 million to train stabilisation unit members so that they would help us deal with a significant instability caused by gangs, particularly at that time in Manenberg. And the stabilisation unit had a very good effect and a good impact, and the problem went down very substantially. We had a large number of people actively trained, as I understood it, to perform the stabilisation duties, but there wasn't any budget in the city's community safety department to actually put them on active duty. So it seemed to us that if we have trained people to do the work, but they aren't doing the work, and they need the funds to be able to pay them to do the work, it felt worth taking money from an emergency contingency fund to make sure that would happen so that we could get schools functional, children back in safe conditions to schools, and teachers out of that stress situation. So that is what we did. We've also had a number of meetings with the community in Lavender Hill and with principals in Lavender Hill. And from the messages that Minister Plato and I are getting, the interventions seem to be working well to calm the situation.
Honourable Wenger.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Given that this is not the first time the province has assisted to fund the stabilisation unit, going forward, will this funding to the city government be recurring?
It's a very complex question, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Our mandate is oversight of the national SAPS, the South African Police Services. But our function is also education. And if we are in a situation where children aren't getting educated, we have to do something about it. I would obviously prefer it if the city's budget were used to deploy the Metro Police. But if for whatever reason that isn't happening or that can't happen, and children in a large area are not getting any schooling, we can't allow that to continue in that way. So obviously this isn't replicable over the long term and in all places. And I think we also need to use the intergovernmental relations framework process to resolve it. We've had very, very good relations both with the Metro Police on this matter and with the South African Police Services on this particular issue. So General Goss was mandated by the South African Police Services to help us with that, and Director Roberts was mandated by the Metro Police to help us. And they have worked very, very well under the oversight of Minister Plato and his head of department and General Jula to stabilize the situation and to get those children back in school. That was the first port of call. But hopefully we will be able to resolve adequate funding, either from the South African Police Service, because that is their primary job. The city actually does not have this role as a core function. But the Western Cape Police are so understaffed that it's impossible for them to do that job adequately. And so if we want our other services to run, such as clinics and schools, the city and ourselves sometimes have to step in.
Thank you. We move on to the next question. Honourable Gopi.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, my question to the Premier is who else besides her son, Paul Marais, are related to the Honourable Premier and are involved in the business known as Paper Video SA?
Premier.
I don't know what that's got to do with my portfolio, but in fact, as far as I know, my son is the only one. I know that his wife, who is an accounting teacher, has made many videos for them, but she doesn't work for them. So there's only one.
Honourable Gopi.
And what assistance did Gretel Marais, wife of Paul Marais, get from Honourable Premier, her department, or government to advance this business or her career?
None that I know of, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Honourable Gopi, you have another opportunity, your last chance.
Does the Honourable Premier have a brother or relative who directly or indirectly also worked or has worked for provincial government as consultant for the so-called job fund?
Premier, if you want to respond to that.
You know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, family members of politicians are allowed to be involved in the economy as long as they do it complying with all the rules and all the regulations and all the processes. My brother has worked for national government departments very often. He has worked internationally very often. He has never broken any rules. He's an expert economist, and he works according to due process and the rule of law. I have never ever interfered in any single process of this government in terms of procurement, and I never will. To try and paint my family as something like Duduzane Zuma is completely incorrect. If people who are honourable and very good economists get contracts or tenders or consultancies in a legal and compliant way, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, especially if I have no role, which I never would, in influencing a tender process or a consultancy process.
Thank you. We move on. The Honourable Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as we commemorate Youth Month over the June period, and in light of Stats SA's recent revelation of a shocking national youth unemployment rate of 38.6%, can the Premier please advise how many youth benefit annually from the PAY project?
Thank you very much. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the PAY project, it's called the Premier's Advancement of Youth Project, has been one of the great success stories of this government. We take in about 700 young people a year, most of whom are unbelievably keen to do a good job of work and to get something on their CV that they've worked for a government department. And over the years since we have started this, I think just over 4,000 young people have been taken into this project in various ways. About 200 proved to be so good that we retained their services. They're working their way up through government. Another large number went on to tertiary studies in various ways or found jobs elsewhere. So this PAY project has turned out to be a fantastic platform to launch the careers of young people with talent who really want to make something of their lives.
Honourable Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Premier. And in light of your response, Premier, what would you say is the main benefits of the PAY project, and how does it contribute to youth employment in the Western Cape?
Well, you know, the big problem is that when young people, for example, don't have money to go to university and don't have any experience, they back.
Order. Honourable Olivier. Gives the member a chance to speak so that Mr. Mitchell can also pick up what the Premier says.
So, Deputy Speaker, when young people leave school and haven't got the money or the means to go to university and don't have any job experience, this is a wonderful opportunity for them to get some job experience, to learn what it is like to be in a workplace, to learn the discipline of coming to work every morning and what it takes to work collegially with other people in an office environment. And many of them save, even though they only get a stipend, quite a lot of money that enables them to study the following year, or at least take a student loan with some collateral. So it's been a fantastic launching pad for these youngsters, and I would love to be able to expand it, but hopefully the major job initiative by the private sector will be able to do so.
Thank you. Are we then done with that? Then we move on to statements by members. I see the Honourable Schaefer.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's been nearly 10 years since the Democratic Alliance came into government in the Western Cape. We won an outright majority with just under 52% of the votes in 2009, increasing the share to just under 60% in 2014. Judging from the voice of the people in our province, it is clear that more and more voters are turning to the DA for clean, effective and corruption-free governance. One would think that the ANC, when faced with such dwindling numbers in the Western Cape, would make much more of an effort at our province's official opposition. Instead, we see that the ANC Western Cape's branches are falling into shambles. With the dissolution of the party's formal structures in the city on the weekend and the internal bickering surrounding leadership, it is no wonder why the party has now had to call for an intervention by its national counterparts. But the infighting and political erosion of the ANC in our province is but merely a small-scale representation of what is taking place in the party as a whole. Crony-led factions and greedy tenderpreneurs have long hijacked the ANC for their own personal gain. In a recent analysis of the ANC's policy discussion this past weekend, the policy document is said to, and I quote, point to a party in panic about losing power. As the DA continues to grow in our province and in the country, the ANC continues to decline. Soon the colours of green, black and gold will be nothing more than a fading flicker on the backbench of our legislature. The ANC has always brands itself as a political organisation and a revolutionary movement, but the party has become far too accustomed to power, so much so that it still lives in the apartheid-era delusions of grandeur. We see this each and every day in Zuma's ANC, and we continue to see it in the ANC's continual failure as an opposition party in the Western Cape. I thank you.
The ANC, Honourable Magaka.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. This legislature must note that Western Cape Premier Nzil is now a free agent, as the DA card held loose from serious decision-making bodies. This is a hot air balloon drifting into the sunset. It all went wrong with her twist that not all things under colonialism were bad. In fact, the Premier is no longer welcome in the top of her party or in the Western Cape. She is merely kept like a bird in a cage. She is now seen by many as lame duck Premier. She must just hang on for the rest of her term to get the perks, payments, pension, and personnel, something she loved dearly and lived for. Hence, she refused to lead the DA caucus at the National Assembly and came here for better remuneration and power and for patronage. Cape Town has a clean audit, but not enough water due to bad management. Just recently, we saw the no-show Cape Town Mayor Patricia de Lille and Premier Nzil when South African Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebana called them to Masiphumelele to look into the filthy people live in. Both institutions brag about clean audit, but cannot provide an acceptable clean living environment for people who stay in Masiphumelele. The DA does not care about poor and ordinary people's lives and living conditions. Hence, their artificial growth is gonna go down and they will lose even this Western Cape. The DA is a party of contradiction and double standard. I thank you.
Thank you. The DA, order, Honourable Wali.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I wonder whether the members on the other side don't have some sort of a effigy complex with regard to the Premier. They just go on and on and on. So let's rather talk about let's not talk about something really serious. The continuous destruction of public transport system is getting out of hand. Since January 2017, no less than 28 coaches have been set alight by angry commuters in our province. Metro Rail, unfortunately, only has 58 train sets. In order for the service to run efficiently and without train delays, requires 84 train sets in all. As violent protests continue to target key infrastructure in our country and province, this suggests that many people clearly do not feel that they are being listened to. This has inevitably played out in people being violent and destructive and behaving in an unacceptable manner when it comes because they feel they have nothing to lose. But they do. They have both their jobs and their family lives to lose. Another concern is the very nature of these violent protests. Just the other day, a My City bus was torched while passengers were left to scramble for their lives. This is clearly an indicator that these protesters have a total disregard for other people's lives. This must be stopped, and those guilty must be caught and prosecuted for their actions. Ultimately, torching trains and buses only makes the public transport system worse than before. We urge all those who have information in this regard, with regard to the destruction of public transport infrastructure, to speak out, as those who randomly destroy our public transport infrastructure are depriving law-abiding citizens of their right to affordable, accessible and safe public transport and to get to work and back home again. Unfortunately, Deputy Speaker, as you know, people are having to wait. Earlier this week, they cancelled over 20 trains on one line in one morning. That's no way for an economy to grow, nor people to be able to get to their legitimate work.
Thank you. The EFF is absent. I see the DA again. Honourable Kivedu.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The 16th of June, Youth Day was widely celebrated by all South Africans as the youth's praises were sung. However, at the end of Youth Month, I fear that after this month, business will simply continue as usual. On the Deputy Speaker, we continue to hear vivid stories and incidents of crime in the media on a day-to-day basis. Substance abuse amongst the youth remain a major area of concern, and we sit with a youth unemployment rate of well over 50%. On the Deputy Speaker, it breaks my heart that after 2 decades of democracy and ANC rule, the future continues to look bleak. The reality for young South Africans is that they will continue to be marginalized from being active participants in South Africa's economy. And let me dare to say, the youth are the invisibles. They exist, but they do not live. Honorary Deputy Speaker, over more recent years, national government has been shouting the importance of entrepreneurial development and has urged the youth to become job creators and not job seekers. It is becoming more and more evident that this has been highlighted by the ANC government as a means to completely push the responsibility of job creation onto the youth instead of national government seeking to create an environment more conducive to more employment opportunities for young people. In conclusion, Honorary Deputy Speaker, how does national government simply expect the youth to create something out of nothing? Consequently, the national government is creating its own future monsters. We are sitting on a time bomb waiting to explode. Aish.
The ANC. Honourable Olivier.
I think it's ASO. Is it ASO? Deputy Speaker, the DA government is quick to tell us it wants evidence for arbitrary farm evictions. But the DA is very quiet on the latest such evil deed. It is because the owner of that Kreis Rivier farm is one Jacobs Martinez Geyser Becker. He is also known as Jack Becker in the Little Karoo and Southern Cape, where he is a prominent DA leader and public representative. Yes, the DA leaders are actively involved in kicking out vulnerable people from off farms. The DA does not care about our poor farm workers and ordinary workers. It only sides with the bosses. In the case of Calitzdorp, pensioner Martha Pretorius, 66 years old, was told to go after she lived on the farm for 55 years and spent most of it servicing the landowner. Her parents also worked for Becker family and are buried on that same farm. She started damages and illegal eviction claim process for compensation in the Magistrate Court under the Extension of Security Tenure Act. She has also laid a charge against the landowner with South African Human Rights Commission. Just last week, another cruel eviction started in the Drakenstein area. Where will all this madness end?
Thank you. The DA, Honourable Max.
Deputy Speaker, let's be clear. The fact that 80% of our municipalities, or 24 out of 30, for those who might be mathematically challenged, receive clean audits, and is certainly not by default. Since 2009, when the DA, under leadership of our Premier Helen Zille, came into power, this province has gone from strength to strength. Deputy Speaker, to think in 2009, when we took over from the ANC, the Western Cape didn't have a single clean audit. This is just indicative of the ANC's inability to govern. as the DA, we know how to govern, not only to govern, but do it without corruption. Deputy Speaker, we are seeing here, what we are seeing here is that we have a government in place that has been working extremely hard and smart to achieve all these successes. What pleases me most, however, is that the DA-led government is still pursuing more success because it seeks to ensure that each resident receive a fair opportunity to improve their lives.
Order.
Deputy Speaker, it also highlights the importance of having capable, qualified, and experienced politicians and staff.
Order.
Visionary and people-orientated
Honourable
politicians.
Max, just 1 second. Honourable Olivier, you've just had your opportunity. You can't continue. Please continue, Honourable Max.
Speaker, Deputy Speaker, it also highlights the importance of having capable, qualified, and experienced staff and visionary politicians who are people-orientated to be at the forefront of taking this province and soon the country forward. I must pay homage to our Premier Helen Zille because she had laid the foundation, set the path, navigated the Western Cape DA-led government, and this is why we are rapidly moving forward in the right direction.
Order.
The saying goes, Deputy Speaker.
Finish off. Order. Just finish.
The
Finish
saying goes, Deputy Speaker, an army of deer led by a lion is more to be feared than an army of lion led by a deer. Our Premier, Helen Zille, our lioness, lead a Western
Order.
Cape.
Order. Before we order. I want order. Please come to order before the Honourable Christians start. ACDP.
Deputy Speaker, sadly again, just 2 days ago, a fetus was found in a dustbin by a cleaner in Voortrek Road, Bellville. Yet again, yesterday, a fetus was found in Ifuleni. Deputy Speaker, the question is today, which programs is in place by the Health Department to educate and assist our young girls when it comes to abortions and illegal abortions? Speaker, News 24 reported approximately 300 illegal abortions takes place annually in our backstreet. It also reports the equipment of these abortionists are knitting needles, spoons, dishwashing liquid. Speaker, many of those who does not make an accurate, that use accurate equipment does not survive. So my plea is that our Health Department and our Minister will look at what is the progress in place to educate our young girls. I thank you.
It's now the ANC's opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Order.
What happened yesterday at Scopa during the continued political witch hunt and vindictive agenda by Chief Whip Mark Wiley and the DA caucus against 2 members of the ANC cannot be left uncontested. As the norm is, the AG gave a clear and concise explanation of the reason for the performance audit conducted for the period June 20th to September 2012, and the report was tabled between October 2013 and February 2014. Having just completed a national audit on infrastructure, they chose 2 departments that use mostly consultants to implement infrastructure projects, namely Health and Transport and Public Works. They also explained the difference between a performance audit and the scope of the audit and that of a regular annual financial audit, but most importantly, where the value for money was realized after the use of the consultants over the period in question. In spite of the Department of Transport and Public Works, also health officials giving clear and concise responses as to their corrective measures put in place, explaining financial terms and convincingly explaining that there was nothing untoward committed by the ANC's MECs at the time or the consultants used, the DA still continued to push for summonsing of the two ANC MECs. The DA even went as far as putting out a press statement with ludicrous allegations to summons the two members before the committee even had deliberated on the issue and or taken a final decision. This is totally unheard of, that a party can summons an MEC to appear before it, especially if no proof exists of any corrupt activities implemented by the two members, as they were not audited. Even though the performance audit, which addresses management issues, clearly proved that no MEC at any stage approved, condoned or signed off on consultants, the DA persists in wanting to punish only two ex-ANC MECs with trumped-up offences. As ANC, we strongly condemn these vindictive actions of the DA and the continued personal vendetta of the Chief Whip, which just sours the work of this legislator instead of playing their own oversight role over their own MECs and departments who are not performing.
Thank you. Your time has expired. The DA. Honourable Slotty.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the continued handing over of title deeds to qualifying residents of the Western Cape must be a priority. The department has prioritized 47 million rands for title deeds so that 56,000 houses can be transferred in the current financial year. My question, however, Deputy Speaker, is how do we expect to redress the past if the handing over of title deeds are not fast-tracked? This is not impossible to achieve. In fact, when the department hands a house or land over to a resident, it should be accompanied by the title deed. Our residents should not have to wait for the title deed because it represents a direct transfer of land and wealth. By handing over the title deed, we are giving our people a sense of belonging. We are restoring their dignity. It also allows them to enter the economic mainstream. Furthermore, it serves as a reminder that they now own something that no one can take away from them. We cannot talk about redress if the handing over of title deeds is not a priority. The long wait for residents to get their title deeds must be addressed. I therefore call on the Honourable Minister Madikizela to ensure that the municipalities immediately and urgently fast-track the handover processes. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. That's the end of member statements. We now move to motions. Are there any motions where notice is given? I see the Honourable Schaefer again.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. That this House debates the impact of the fourth industrial revolution on job creation in the Western Cape.
Notice is taken of that. Are there any more? Honourable Gopi.
Motion with notice that the House debates the risk gentrification put on the heritage of historic sites in the province like the coveted Boekap.
Thank you. Notice is taken of that. Honourable Makaleni.
Deputy Speaker, I move that without notice that the House debates the need for a commission of inquiry into child killings in the province.
Thank you. Notice is taken of that. Honourable Kividu.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move with notice that this House debates the impact of the damage caused by the recent storms and fires to 172 schools in the Western Cape and the reconstruction plan of the WCD whilst taking cognizance of budgetary constraints.
Thank you. Notice is taken of that. Honourable Mackenzie.
Deputy Speaker, I move with notice that the House debate the impact of the equitable share of the national budget not being distributed equitably to the South Africa's provinces.
Notice is taken of that. Honourable Olivier.
Deputy Speaker, that this House debates the sanitation crisis in schools around the Western Cape.
Thank you. Notice is taken of that motion. Are there any more? Honourable Mackenzie.
Deputy Speaker, I move with notice that this House debate the impact of early childhood organizations in our communities as funded by government.
Thank you. Notice is taken. Honourable Nkosela.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, I move with notice that the House debates the impact of meritocracy in the public sector and its benefit on good governance.
Thank you. Notice is taken of that. Honourable Gopi, do you want to move? Not. Honourable Olivier. I saw somebody there. Honourable Olivier. Not. You don't want. Okay. Honourable McKenzie, I see you.
Deputy Speaker, I move with notice that this House debate the impact of corruption on job creation.
Notice is taken of that. Are there any further? Again, Honourable McKenzie.
Deputy Speaker, I move with notice that the House debates the measures the Western Cape government has introduced to curb unemployment versus the national government. Thank you.
Notice is taken of that one. Any further? Honourable McKenzie.
Deputy Speaker, I move with notice that this House debate the impact on unfunded mandates on provinces and municipalities.
Notice is taken of that. Are there any more? If not, we then proceed to motions without notice. Honourable Gopi.
Deputy Speaker, I move without notice that the House notes that the initiation season has kicked in, wishes the boys who will be going through this rite of passage well, and call on the Western Cape government to stop undermining this important tradition of the Amakosa. I thank you.
Is there any objection to the motion being moved without notice? No objection to the motion. Is there objection? There is no objection. Will be printed in the order paper. Honourable Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That I move without notice that the House condemns the criminal attacks on truck drivers passing through Beaufort West. I so move.
No objection to the motion being moved without notice? Is there objection? No objection to the motion being moved without notice. No objection to the motion itself. Agreed to. Honourable Chacham. I stopped in time.
Deputy Chair.
You may proceed.
Motion without notice that the House condemns the regrettable involvement of Westcro in cheap politics, reminds the entity that it is only an investment arm of the government and therefore doesn't need to be involved in petty party politics in newspapers, and calls for the relevant authority to ensure that this is not repeated.
Any objection? There are objections that will be printed in the order paper. Honourable Willie Fear first.
Deputy Speaker, I move that this House notes with grave concern the violent protests broke out in Joe Slovo near Milnerton, which were partly perpetuated by the provincial government unwillingness to meaningfully consult residents in poor townships. Notes further that the protest that started on Sunday after the Western Cape Education Department removed the mobile classrooms that were used by Khosi Primary School and evicted protesting residents who occupied the land, condemns the torching and vandalism of property, and calls on the Western Cape government to come up with meaningful strategies to engage communities to prevent the reoccurrence of this violent protest.
Any objections? There are objections that will be printed in the order paper. Honourable Simmers.
Deputy Speaker, thank you. I move without notice that the House congratulates the Greco National Conference that will be celebrating the 113th year of establishment on the 2nd of July. I so move.
Thank you. No objection to the motion being moved without notice. No objection to the motion itself. Agreed to. Honourable Kifedu.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move without notice that this House congratulates Cape Town-born South African trail runner Ryan Sandys on coming first in the Western States 100-mile race that took place in California last weekend in a time of 16 hours, 19 minutes. This is an outstanding achievement as the race is considered one of the most challenging trail races in the world. I so move.
No objection to the motion being moved without notice. No objection to the motion itself. Agreed to. Honourable Diana.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Motion without notice that the House commends the police for their brilliant work in fighting crime in the province after the arrest of 3 men in the biggest drug haul, in which 253 boxes of cocaine worth an estimated value of 500 million were confiscated in the Overberg village of Villiers. I so move.
No objection to the motion being moved without notice. No objection to the motion itself. Agreed to. Honourable Mitchell.
Dankie, agbare Deputy Speaker. Dat die huis sy medelee oordra aan die familie, vriende, oudskoliere en die breë gemeenskap van Beaufort Wes met die heengaan van meneer Nicolas Roman. Meneer Roman het 'n lewenslange bydrae tot Bastiaanse Hoërskool gemaak, eers as oud-leerder, toe as onderwyser en gedurende 1995 tot 2010 het hy as skoolhoof gedien. Meneer Roman sal onthou word vir sy onbaatsigtige diens aan die breë gemeenskap van Beaufort Wes, as ook elke leerder wat deur sy hande gegaan het. Mag sy siel in vrede rus.
Geen beswaar teen die voorstel sonder kennis, geen beswaar teen die voorstel self. Goedgekeur. Agbare Max.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Move without notice. That this House notes and congratulates Wayne van Niekerk for breaking the world 300-meter record at the recent Golden Spike made in Ostrava in the Czech Republic. The 17-year-old record belonged to the legendary American athlete Michael Johnson. Van Niekerk, who also broke Johnson's 400 world record with a time of 43.3 seconds at last year's Rio Olympics, shaved 400 hundredths of a second off Johnson's mark as he stopped the clock at 30.81 seconds. He is the first man to run a sub-10 seconds 100 meters, a sub 20 seconds for 200 meters, a sub 44 seconds for 400 meters, and now a sub 31 seconds for 300 meters. Wade should be continually hailed for his phenomenal achievements.
No objection to the motion being moved without notice. No objection to the motion itself. Honourable Christians.
Deputy Speaker, I move without notice that this House congratulate soccer player Chad Block, aged 14 years age, from Hanover Park, which has been selected for this SA Schools, and they will later this year go to Thailand to participate in the international, the 27 Thailand international competition.
Thank you. No objection to the motion being moved without notice. No objection to the motion itself. Agreed to. Honourable Olivier.
Deputy Speaker, I move that this House notes with concern that 400 learners from Kosi Primary School did not receive formal education this year as the Western Cape Education Department declares their school illegal. Notes that further, while the department could have placed them at another school in the area, it waited until late this week to place them, and call on the South African Human Rights Commission to investigate as to whether the rights of the learners were not infringed upon. I so move.
There's no objection to that motion being moved without notice. It will be printed on the order paper. Honourable Kividu.
Thank you, excuse me. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move without notice that this House congratulates the principal and the whole school community of the newly established collaboration school, Swelatemba High School in Worcester, who after visiting the school was highly commended by Education Minister Debbie Schaffer for showing vast improvement and good performance after only a few months of being in existence. I so move.
Any objection to the motion being moved without notice? No objection to the motion itself. Agreed to. Honourable Chacha.
Thanks. Motion without notice. Move that the House notes with concern the scares of the swine flu and the adenovirus in the city, and calls on provincial government to urgently take steps to ensure all necessary measures are in place to prevent the spread.
Any objection to the motion being moved without notice? No objection to the motion itself. Motion is agreed to. Are there any further? Honourable Max.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move without notice that this House notes and wishes all the best to the under 13, under 16, and under 18 academy and under 18 senior Craven Week teams that will be participating in the annual Craven Week tournament during the July school holidays. Much is expected from the under 18 senior Craven Week team, seeing that they are the defending champions of the 23rd edition of this tournament that will be taking place at St. 30th College in Johannesburg from 17 to 22 July. I so move.
No objection to the motion being moved without notice. No objection to the motion itself. Agreed to. Honourable Diana.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Motion without notice that the House welcomes Minister Nomvula Mukonyane's decision to end the term of office of the Overberg Water Board with immediate effect following a probe which found alleged financial irregularities. I so move.
No objection to the motion being moved without notice. No objection to the motion itself. Agreed to. Honourable Kividu.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I move without notice that this House congratulates the principal of Silverstream Primary School in Manenberg, Ms. V.I. Ward, as well as the whole school community who, in spite of being located in an area rife with social pathologies and ills, still managed through good management to excel beyond expectations. This has been evident on the Standing Committee on Education Oversight visit to the school on Tuesday, 27 June 2017. I so move. Thank
No
you.
objection to the motion being moved without notice. No objection to the motion itself. Agreed to. Honourable Makaleni first.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, I move without notice that the House condemns the suspension of Ronald Prince, 30, from Strandfontein as dispatch clerk at Pinnacle because her bosses thought her shoulder-length curls were not professional enough, and notes further that racism in the Western Cape will never end, and calls on relevant authorities to intervene urgently.
Any objection to the motion? There are objections. Will be printed on the order paper. Honourable Nkasela.
Deputy Speaker, I move without notice that this House...
Order.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, I move without notice that this House condemns the acts of criminality and the burning of my city bus on Tuesday in Danun and Community Hall in Phoenix in Minati, and further call on the City of Cape Town and all available stakeholders and law enforcement agencies to stop at nothing to get the perpetrators to account.
Any objections to the motion being moved? Is there objection? There is an objection. That motion will be printed on the order paper. Are there any further? For the last time, are there any further? Honourable Chacha.
I demand that you must meet. Motion without notice. Move that the House notes the ANC yesterday, for the second time in a few days, was so victorious in the West Rand local municipality of Mogale City, which beat the DA and EFF coalition, which were yesterday rejected. Further notes that the ANC won the municipality leadership election and congratulates the ANC for its continuous victory.
Are there any objections to that motion? There are objections. It will be printed on the order paper. Order. Are there any further? Honourable Nkasela.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, I move without notice that the House welcomes 22.2 million rands that will be spent over the next 4 years on the construction of the new Metro Southeast Cemetery in Fuleni and extending the existing cemeteries. I so move.
Are there any objections to that motion being moved without notice? No objection to the motion itself. Agreed to. You have another one, Honourable Nkasela?
This is the last one, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I move without notice that the House notes, acknowledge and celebrate the water-saving efforts of the 46-year-old Kailicha resident, Mtutuzeli Zebukwene. Zebukwene and his household has since 2013 used grey water from their baths, post-dishwashing, to manually flush their toilet system. This man and his family is an epitome of active citizenry and an example to all of us, and one that we ought to follow. and appreciate. I
Thank
so
you.
move.
No objection to that motion without notice. No objection to the motion itself. Motion is agreed to. For the last time, are there any more? If not, then that brings us to the end of motions without notice. Before we adjourn, can I just remind members that the CPA AGM will not take place now, as we indicated initially. It will be rescheduled for a future date. That brings us to the adjournment. The House is adjourned.